Hola, hola. Estamos por comenzar. Los que están afuera, por favor, si quieren entrar y tomar asiento. ¿Queda gente afuera? Bueno, buenas tardes a todos. Hi, everybody. No, that's not my line. We are presenting here the results of the hackathon today, and we have a lot of panels. Vamos a tener varios paneles, vamos a presentar a los ganadores y a todos los participantes del hackathon que estuvieron trabajando estos últimos 2 días a full. Hay gente que vino de muchísimos países, tenemos presentes personas de más de 50 países, según me dijeron. Buenas tardes a todos, bienvenidos. Mi nombre es Santiago Casina y los voy a guiar un poco, a pesar de todas estas veces que le dije a José, no cometas el error de traerme de nuevo. Él insiste y me trae, quejo me guía, y aquí estoy acompañándolos. Hemos tenido unos días intensos, mucho trabajo, muchas buenas charlas. A los que estuvieron presentes en A3, en la calle El Salvador, al 5200 en Palermo, participamos de paneles, de workshops y del hackathon de Midnight y el hackathon organizado por IOG Education. Así que sin mucho más preámbulo vamos a dar comienzo a la primera parte, al primer panel, donde vamos a dar la introducción y la presentación de los premios, the Introduction and Award Presentation of the Hackathon, guided by Las Bruñez from IOG Education and Robertino Martínez. Please, come on. Diego Lizarazo y Claude Barr de Midnight, please come with us and present the winners. Explain some kind of the job you've done. Por favor, cuéntenos qué hicieron estos días. Adelante, ahí les habilito el micrófono. Bueno, fuerte aplauso, por favor, para los presentes. Adelante.
Creo que vamos a encontrar.
Okay, thank you very much for coming. It's very exciting it's now the second time for me that I helped organizing or running a hackathon here. The first one was 2 years ago, and it's very exciting to see how much it has grown and how much more mature the projects actually are and how much further the tooling came along in the last 2.5 years. So we had some very exciting contenders, and it was very difficult to decide who should get the 3 prizes, but it's really a great project, so we're very glad that what that will bring to the community. So, yeah.
Yeah, so we stay until 3 a.m. like checking the code, and then like 9 a.m. in the morning until 11, like debating and stuff. Luckily, we had a proper procedure placed beforehand that helped a lot, but it was hard because we had like amazing teams. So thank you, everyone.
Sí, bueno, voy a hablar tantito español para agradecer a Ada Solar y a todos los participantes que estuvieron. La verdad, el evento estuvo a la altura. También todos los proyectos que se presentaron, la verdad, muchísimas gracias por su empeño y su dedicación. Thanks a lot for all coming here. So it's time to say los ganadores. The important things for this event, so the emotional.
Okay, so on third place, a great team that had clean code and it worked properly. So that's also nice to see in a hackathon, because it's not just an idea, it has to be implemented, so beautiful. And that tool that helped gauge the sentiment of the community about the decisions of the committees, and if they agree or not on their posture, etc. So in this team is judgment. So I think if someone from judgment is here,
I hope so.
I hope so, because I'm not seeing them. Maybe they're late. I'm pretty sure they're not here because I'm not seeing them. But on third place is Judgment. So maybe they are in the other place. Okay, so in second.
So the second is for one of the team that works a lot. I saw that the work was very emotional when they discovered things that doesn't work and then works. I feel the feeling, so personally. And the second is for super. Congratulations, girls.
Congratulations. Please come. Yeah.
Woo.
Yeah, they build an amazing tool to help DAOs make decisions.
I saw the girl went up, screamed like, finally works.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Can we take a picture? Or 5? Yes. So let's. No, maybe we can announce the second one and then pictures.
Yeah.
Yes, the first place. Yeah. Perfect. Yeah.
Right, so the first place we were very impressed with all our categories that we had said. I mean, the pitch was nice, the code looks beautiful, and most importantly, maybe it solves a very interesting or important problem, namely to hold DREPs to high standards by providing a mechanism to compare different DREPs and also to let your DREP know what you would want him to vote. So we're very impressed by the Electricos, who we award first place.
Please, come here. Great work. Amazing work, guys. Amazing work. Okay, so maybe we can take a picture with the Cardano Hackathon winners. Yeah, perfect. Let's go in the middle. Let's go in the middle. Please. Ooh, watch out. Don't break Cardano, please. Thank you so much. So thank you, everyone. Amazing teams, amazing hackathon. And now we give it up to midnight for them to announce their winners.
Thank you. Muchas gracias, Robertino. Well, I'll try to do a little bit of Spanish and English and we'll see how it goes. Lo primero que quería agradecerles pues a todos los organizadores. Muchas gracias a todas las personas que han estado con nosotros durante el fin de semana. Y sobre todo, nos parece muy importante es que, Midnight sinceramente empezó como un proyecto pequeñito dentro de I.O. y ahora es algo muchísimo más grande, pero a veces se nos olvida que todavía es una tecnología bastante nueva. Entonces, solo el hecho de que algunos vengan y nos muestren interés ya nos da mucho alivio, mucho corazón y muchas esperanzas por lo que vamos a hacer. So, trying to go back, pretty much, I'm just going to summarize. Thank you, everyone. Midnight, this is still a young project. We're still kind of like in testnet right now, and that was just like a few weeks ago that a couple of months ago, that we moved to testnet. So it's still great to see so many projects kind of coming, talking with us, showing their interest. But since I know that the important part is the winners, like we're going to go with.
Okay, so do you hear me?
Yeah.
Does that work? Okay. So I'm going to.
Oh, well, take this one.
Okay, now it should work.
There.
Okay. It's because I was not speaking Spanish, so that's why.
Yeah.
So, Yeah, so the third winner of the Midnight Hackathon is third and fourth routes.
So, just really quick about them, we were really happy that someone tried to take like and tackle on to be in both tracks. I know that it's kind of like a lot of work to try to do two different technologies and trying to figure out like both documentations, everything else. So it is awesome that you guys kind of like did try. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Okay, so well, moving on. Second place, I think I'm not going to say a lot about them because I think they have been here for kind of like represented Midnight already for quite some time, and you guys have been kind of like really awesome, and that is pretty much ETA. So you guys may have seen them already, kind of like Eric being strong there presenting. So really awesome project. Okay. Antes hablamos. Yo también quiero mi abrazo, pero ¿por qué no? Gracias.
Gracias.
No, gracias a ti. And of course, number one.
And now for the number one. So first of all, I would like to thank you because you came with a lot of questions. So you gave a lot of work to our engineers. When I come back to London, I will have a lot of feedback to give them. And so the number one is Fran and the Redeemers.
Gracias. No. Congratulations. Gracias. Más. Todo. And that's it from us. Really, thank you. We're going to take some pictures. Please come for the next hackathon. Ask more questions and connect with us. See you during the rest of the
Fuerte
afternoon.
aplauso.
Yes.
Bueno, como anunciamos públicamente, el premio para el hackathon de Cardano es de 24.000 hadas, a dividir en 10.000 hadas para el primer puesto, 8.000 para el segundo y 6.000 para el tercero. ¿Y cómo lo reparten? Ahora te paso. Espera. Toma.
¿Ustedes están? Sí. El premio entonces para, okay, so let's go back to English. The prize then for the midnight track, that is $10,000, then that whatever converts in the time that is converted to ADA, and it's $5,000 for first prize, $3,000 second prize, $2,000 third prize. And like, well, I don't know what is going to be the conversion rate during that day, so just keep pushing so ADA keeps going up so you get even more. Or actually goes down so you get more dollars. Whatever it is, the conversion, just keep praying for that. That's it.
Thank you, Diego. And please, one representative of each winner team contact Quechua, the organizer, and to define the wallet where we will send the prize, okay? And then Nelson.
Okay, so really pretty much kind of like what we're going to do is I already have all your emails from the different teams that submitted, so I'll get you kind of like in that part with procurement. It's really one of these things of logistics that I don't really like, and then they are going to be doing the payment. So unfortunately, I really wanted to have like the big check here and give it to you, but they didn't approve for that idea, so sorry about that.
That's perfect. Yeah. That's perfect. And we will announce it publicly, and everyone will see the transaction. Okay?
Fuerte aplauso. Gracias, José. Bueno, queremos aprovechar para agradecer a la Junta de la UTN que nos cedió este espacio para, como siempre, tan cordiales, tan hospitalarios, nos ceden este espacio para presentar esto. I want to thank you, the UTN board, for seizing this place, this place. We are going forward with the next panel. Con el siguiente panel vamos a avanzar, que es The State and Future of Decentralized Technology, con Diego Lizarazo again from Midnight, Santiago Carmuega de TX Pipe, Alan Berner de Globant y modera Robertino Martínez. Así que adelante por favor con el panel. Fuerte aplauso. Sin miedo, ya estuvieron ahí. No, el grande.
This is just... no sabía que no estaba Alan. ¿Cómo se llama? No está Alan. ¿Empezamos? Change of plans.
Buenas tardes. Sí, sí.
So while we wait for the third member, I'm not clear if this should be in English or Spanish, but we'll do it in English just to be.
Can we maybe raise hands? To see?
Oh yeah, so good
Some
idea.
governance.
Yeah.
There's a decision here
Let's
to be
read
made.
consensus. So who wants this to be in English? Good.
A lot of people.
¿Cuántos quieren que sea en español?
Pero es que son casi igual. ¿Qué pasó? No se supone que hay más hispanohablantes.
Okay, so we had English
English,
majority. Okay, so like the title of the panel is like, you cannot make it more generic.
Very specific. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to ignore it a little bit, and since we have 3 builders, one is still building, looks like it. So hopefully he will make it. But we have like great builders here. We want to, like, I want to take the opportunity to discuss a bunch of subjects that are like currently on the mind of the whole Cardano community. So just to honor the present part of the talk, so let's just skip Alan's question and go to Santi. So Santi, you not only saw the development tools, how the development tools evolve, but your company played an important role in the evolution.
Very important. Yeah.
Very important. So what do you think about the current state of Cardano development tools, and what are the areas that should the community work on the future?
So the current state, I think that it's much better than where we were like 2 years ago. We made huge strides on the side of on-chain validators, and I think that ICANN there played an important role. I think that we learn a lot on how to model the apps on top of the UTXO model, which is not easy, and I think that there is no other ecosystem that knows how to make the UTXO the apps as Cardano does on top of UTXO. I might be wrong, but I think that after 2 years we sort of went through the things that doesn't work. We attempted a lot of things, and some stick, some others didn't, and now we sort of understand a few of the best practices that make it possible for the sort of the apps that we want to build on the ecosystem. But there's still a lot of pain points. I think that from the perspective of developer experience, if you compare us to other ecosystems, and we were talking about this yesterday on one of the panels, I think that if you look at Ethereum, for example, where developers, when they want to interact with a contract, they just sort of call a function. It's the level of abstraction is quite similar to when you're programming anything else and you just call a function in Ethereum, in EVM, strictly speaking. It's more like calling a function, and that's the whole extent of how you interact with the contract. Here in the UTXO model, we need to understand how to build the transaction, the inputs and outputs. We need to think of the outcome, and we need to understand all of the little details of how to construct that complex transaction, and that it's a lot more work than what you would expect in other ecosystems. So when a developer comes from one of these ecosystems and jumps into Cardano, I think that's the first brick wall that they hit, trying to build that transaction. And then you get to the point where you need to start testing transactions. And how you test transactions, I think that we improved a lot on how we test validators in isolation, but the idea of being able to test a more complex sequence of transactions where multiple parties are involved, that is also one of the pain points, and hopefully one thing that we can sort of improve in the ecosystem. So I would say we were pretty new a couple of years ago. Now we understand what needs to happen, and hopefully in the next few months / year, we will be able to finish all of the tooling that is required to make Cardano development a nice developer experience.
Perfect. So, like, at least half of the issues that you mentioned are related to accounting system, like how extended UTXO works.
Yeah.
Is the trade-off worth it to have extended UTXO for like the higher core level?
Yeah, I think so. The jury's still out, I think, but yeah.
On your opinion?
Yeah, no, I think that determinism on the blockchain is an important trade. It's an important trade, so we shouldn't skip it. And obviously there are contexts for everything. One might argue that maybe there is a place for the apps that will perform better on an accounting model system, but for a lot of things, and in particular with zero knowledge being the hot topic, I think that determinism and UTXO model should be the thing that we focus on.
Perfect.
For sure.
So it's just a matter of time that we keep evolving. We don't need like huge change in Cardano itself. It's just tooling. Yeah. Okay.
So I think that the past years, Cardano has proven that complex DApps can be built, and that the 1TPS thing, and that the contention issues are a thing, but there are ways to work around it if you know how to design your DApp. So those were the unknowns that we sort of improved throughout the past few months, and those were the tough things. What remains, it's just about tooling, so I think that's the easy part. We just need to make the things that we do more friendly for developers.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Amazing. Nice to have you here, Alan.
Robertino, I think we skipped an important part, introductions. But now we
I thought the master of ceremony did. Okay, so
no, but it's perfect because
okay,
now we have Robertino.
yes, amazing.
Like,
so maybe each person can like introduce themselves, and and then speak a little bit of what you do and how are you related with Cardano.
Okay, well, since I opened my mouth to get into this section,
it's your fault.
It's my fault. So for the ones that have not met me yesterday, which it's quite hard because I think I talked with many of you yesterday. So I am Diego Lizarazo, and I'm lead at DevRel, so developer relations at Midnight. And I always say that my job is to kind of talk with developers, and guess what I'm doing right now? That's it.
Me? Okay. Well, I'm Santiago Carmuega. I'm from TXPipe. At TXPipe, we develop tooling for developers. And yeah.
Hi, everybody. Sorry for being late. My name is Adan. I used to be the CTO of a company named Atix. I'm in the Cardano ecosystem from the very beginning. Hi, Lars. And actually, this is a joke because I brought my old school Midnight t-shirt as a joke for Diego. Glad to be here.
Amazing. So, Alan, I have a question for you now that you're here. So, we heard the perspective from Santiago about how things evolved through these years and what we look forward to. But you spent some time working on Cardano, then you started working on other chains, and now you come back, and then you came back to Cardano. So how do you compare the way of development, the ease of development? What big changes as a builder did you notice between then and now?
So at the very beginning, it was not easy to work on top of Cardano. Maybe Santi mentioned that already. We had this enormous work from Lars. He created tons of material, but you required Haskell knowledge, right? And the extended UTXO model is a little bit different than the rest of the chains. I would say 80% of the other chains use account models. So material around internet and tooling and everything goes towards that direction. I'm very happy that now we have Aiken and several tools that TXPipe folks are building, and thus making everything a little bit more easier, which I think it's super important, because the idea is to onboard people and to be able to deliver stuff, not to spend 3 times the amount of time that you were supposed to, because tooling is hard, right?
Amazing. So, Diego, hearing all this, and actually Midnight comes a long way, but Midnight saw all the difficulties that Cardano developers had throughout all these years and how the tooling evolved to account for that. So what decisions took Midnight to prevent those issues?
Okay, well, that is interesting. So, well, one of the first ones, and this directly comes because of the fact that I work with developers, is that, well, you don't see really Haskell in our dApps. So that was a decision that in many ways it was hard, because we wanted to still be welcoming of everyone from the Cardano ecosystem, but at the same time, since Midnight, well, it's spinning out right now, and we're going to be our own company, even though we're always going to recognize, coming from the Cardano ecosystem, the community, all the developers that have helped us so far, we wanted to give access to many other developers. And that is not just from the other Web3 space, like other chains, but also like from the Web2. And I think, I literally was writing it down before my phone rang. From Santi, he mentioned something really important, that was the level of abstraction. And is that Midnight is trying to kind of give zero knowledge capabilities to developers without the fact that they should know, without the kind of like the prerequisite of them knowing zero knowledge. So we have to kind of like make it like so much higher that really it's almost like, hey, it's just a function that you're calling there. It's just a library that you have to include. So those were kind of like some of those decisions. At the same time, there were a lot of things from E2XO that we kind of like. For example, the entire part of, this was the joke that I was preparing, because you have input and outputs. The outputs being kind of like immutable, that really helps when you have to kind of generate the proofs, you know, in CK. And at the same time, kind of like the entire thing of being able to do a lot of the work like off chain, that is also something that we kind of like really kind of like take advantage from Midnight. And pretty much every single person that I have been talking to during the weekend, that was one of the things that I was saying, like, hey, you don't really have to put everything on chain. When you generate a proof, in many cases, the proof is what is going to be there. Everything else and a lot of the calculations are off, and that is really great. But in general, I think the language creating Compact, that is a language that is specifically designed for smart contracts, that also kind of like was a decision. I think this is one of these things that we think we're doing it right. We think we're kind of going in the right path, but at the end of the day, it's going to be the community, the one that is going to decide. You know, so like 5 years from now, you may go back and say, hey, I love Midnight and I love that you're using TypeScript and Compact, or you're going to say the complete opposite. So we are trying to listen to our community, but we kind of like set that path, and well, we'll see where it takes us.
Amazing. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So I was wondering, how much of the low-level math of zero knowledge do you have to understand to be a good dApp developer that uses zero knowledge? Do you have to really understand the...
Well, in general, I don't think you need to be like a cryptographer, but specifically with Midnight, the goal was to make it almost like none. You pretty much, the only thing that you need to understand is like, well, there's a proof, there's a circuit, there are like some witnesses and a couple of terms that we're trying to make it really simple. And then you should be able to kind of get started just with that. Apart from that, it should be just an application, and you should focus on the use case that you really want to solve. Again, of course, that's the goal, that's the idea, and so far we have seen, even during this weekend, that it can be done. Now, we are aiming for mass adoption. Like, is that something that like 99% of developers are going to agree with what I just said? We will see, you know? But like the idea is that you shouldn't have to go like, for you, you should be able to go and like say like, there's a proof that is being generated, and it happens magically, you know?
But if you know how the sausage is made, can you optimize for?
Oh yeah, so, of course. Right now, for example, which was also a question that I had like this weekend, like have we already open source all the Midnight code? The answer is no, pretty much just for partners, like with Global, like you guys get access to that, and it's going to take a couple of months before we do it. But once that's done, if you are kind of like really into cryptography, if you're really into like zero knowledge and have like a strong base in those concepts, then you're going to make it perhaps like 10 times better than what we are doing right now. So absolutely, and not just that, create new models, new libraries, new features that we are going to quite likely work with you as a partner to include in Midnight.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So based on your question, I think that in Midnight, you need to consider that it's a different domain. It's zero knowledge based, so you need to think applications differently. But also you need to deal with blockchains, right? And you also need to deal with a programming language to write your own apps. So I think that using TypeScript-ish kind of language is a good choice, because most of the people know TypeScript, or you can easily learn it. And then you need to pay attention to how you create those apps. How do you generate proofs? What's public? What's a public input? What should be hidden for the rest of the users? So I think trying to make those crypto things hidden for the users, at least for standard users, I think it's a good idea. Otherwise, it's going to be super hard if you want to write a circuit, it's really hard. It's really, really complex, and it's not the point of writing a app, right? So.
Right. Yeah, so I think that obviously having a level of abstraction that hides all of the complexity makes a lot of sense, but I feel like in zero knowledge, the performance of the circuits, it's a huge part of the thing that you're building. So maybe by understanding what is happening below the surface, you can maybe make some of those decisions that you shouldn't need to make if you had a perfect abstraction, but sometimes it helps to understand exactly how the math is working.
Yeah, I know, and I completely agree, and I think your original question, if I don't misremember, it was like some of the complications of using UTXO and being in the Cardano ecosystem. Like one of those for us clearly is the time to generate a proof, you know, and that's always going to become like a limitation, because it does take some time. Even the simplest proof is still going to add a delay that the dApp otherwise would not have. At the same time, we want to make it almost like with a car. Most car drivers really understand that there's an engine, but they cannot really get and change the engine or optimize the engine. Of course, the ones that are really into it, they can open the hood, they can modify, they can add parts, and then they can make sometimes monstrosities, other times like really awesome things, and you are always going to have kind of like that additional edge. And that totally makes sense, and we want to kind of like be at a level that you can just get the abstraction or just get to the low level and still kind of like optimize it however you want.
Perfect. Okay, so higher level abstraction than implementing your own algorithm, lower level than Haskell. That's like the Goldilocks zone for abstraction layer. I think that's fine for the present. Let's go to the future. It's more fun. So the future has like partner chain, zero knowledge, of course, new ways of consensus. But before like getting deep into that, like Santi, can you explain us like just a high level overview, like what is a partner chain? What's the difference between partner chain, side chain, L2s? Just to get started.
Can I Google it? No.
Yeah, you can. Definitely.
Yeah, we have a lot of terms, and it gets a little bit blurry on some. I think, or at least I can provide my perspective. You have, first of all, this distinction between L2s and sidechains. They are all within the category of things that you can do to probably try to improve scalability of a chain. But the main difference, just to kind of simplify things, I think that the main difference is the security model below it. So in an L2, you're relying on the security of the L1, which would be the main chain, in a sense. And on a side chain, you actually have your own consensus mechanism. So that consensus is the one that has its own security specifics and its own guarantees. So it's sort of in the same arena, but they try to solve things in a slightly different ways. And then you get partner chains, which is like a whole new category in a sense. And I think that it's a complex. The idea of a partner chain is that by definition, you instead of being a side chain where you have a main chain and something that it's kind of coupled to that, in a partner chain, you're considering something that it's totally decoupled, but that there is interoperability between the two, so that each one can exist independently, and but that they are connected in a way that they can share either information, assets, data, and even with the approach that we've seen with the partner chain SDK from IOC, that what you can do is source validators from Cardano to provide the security of what would be a sidechain. So SPOs in the Cardano ecosystem could form a group, a committee, a block producing committee of this partner chain, and provide security for stuff that happens in this sidechain. And that's a really interesting approach, in my opinion.
Thank you. So now that everyone is ready and everyone understands what is a sidechain, partner chain, L2s, so we have our first partner chain. Cardano has his first partner chain, Midnight. So thank you for being the first partner. And so I think it's clear what Midnight will bring to its users.
Yep.
But what does Midnight bring to Cardano?
Well, besides the entire capability of having kind of like a secure, zero-knowledge way to create dApps, it is also kind of like the ability to connect even with other chains. So like right now, really we're going to be attached to the hip to Cardano for quite some time. That's not going to go anywhere. But we're going to be literally our own company, our own chain. And if at some point we have like a partnership, let's say with, I don't know, Polkadot or like Ethereum or Bitcoin, something like that, then we're kind of like still bringing people to the community, to the ecosystem in a different way. Apart from that, like I mentioned before, we're not just kind of like trying to connect with other people in the Web3 space, but also in the Web2. So like, if you guys are interested, and this is a little bit of one of these almost like marketing things that sometimes I have to do, look for the Electric Capital, like a report about developers in the Web3 ecosystem, and then go and check the one from Stack Overflow. So obviously one is focused on the Web3 ecosystem, the other one is about developers in the world. And Electric Capital, by their own admission, they do say that they undercount the number of developers in the Web3 ecosystem because they are just counting like mostly GitHub comments. So sometimes that people are just kind of like learning or kind of like doing their own project under, well, yeah, kind of like a dark mode. Then they still like count in perhaps tens of thousands of developers, right? Now, if you just go, let's say, to the JavaScript, only one language of the many that we have there, we're counting around 20 million developers. So obviously, the entire thing about taking TypeScript, that is pretty much a subset of the JavaScript ecosystem, still we're talking about millions of developers compared with like, let's being quite optimistic, 200,000 in the Web3 space. So we're kind of like talking about difference of orders of magnitude. So what we want to kind of like make with Midnight is also to kind of like bring many of those developers and to kind of like have a developer adoption that well, so far we have not had in the Web3 space. So we're going to try to do that. That's again a goal, like an aspirational thing. But even if that's not the case, even if we don't get like, well, 20 million, which we're not going to get 20 million, but let's suppose that we still kind of bring that. It's another way, another venue for the Cardano ecosystem to just connect with other people, just to kind of like learn from other developers, have other new use case scenarios, have like new ways to do things. And that's always good. You know, like otherwise, we kind of like tend to be as developers like close in our own echo chambers, and we just kind of like pat our backs and say like, you're doing great, like the entire meme of Spider-Man, like the 3 Spider-Mans pointing at each other, and it just keeps going on and on like a recursive thing. So that happens a lot, and it's because then we get enclosed in our own ecosystems and don't look outside. So having like this opportunity of Midnight and any other partner chain that is going to come after Midnight, that's going to bring more capabilities, more venues for Cardano to keep growing. And I think that's why we kind of like have seen it in the last few days that Charles has been kind of talking about a lot of chains. You know, not just like, hey, Cardano is great, but it's like, we also have other chains that are great and we can work with them, you know, and I think that's a message that is resonating, and everyone's saying like, wow, is that coming from Charles? And it's like, yes, it is, because he's able to kind of like see what other people are not able to see. And one of those steps is Midnight, but again, everyone that, all the other partner chains that are going to come, I know, are bringing kind of like those capabilities too. And I know that was not really kind of like a deeply technical answer, but again, sometimes I have to kind of like go into other like venues, other kind of like areas that kind of like, I don't know, are the purview of the ecosystem.
Okay, you can explain how Halo 2 works just to compensate.
Yeah, sure, because I will be able to do that, especially when I have people here just in the first line that can do so much better than me.
Okay, thank you. So, Alan, I think he needs, oh, you already have a microphone, perfect. So one of Midnight's main attributions to Cardano will be like the connection to bring more developers to having contact with Cardano. But what about the rest, like in general, partner chains? That's like more developers, and that's it. What other things partner chains in general bring to Cardano?
Okay, so I'm not going to speak on behalf of partner chains team, although what I heard is that the approach is to enable, so first of all, there will be an enshrined bridge to Cardano, right? Because you need to observe Cardano, because you are going to ask stake pool operators to provide security to your own network, right? So that should make them rewarded, and hopefully that will push some benefits to Cardano as well. But also the idea is to be able to interact with other chains, right? And at least to me, it's a no-brainer to be able to create a framework to spin new networks, right? Other stacks are doing that already, like the Optimism stack. You have Base for Coinbase, you have, I think it's Sora, and several other chains that are using the same stack, and they have, within the roadmap, they are trying to mix everything all together, right? So you should be able to interact and send transactions between this whole super chain view. I think being able to create these new networks and easily spin them, it's going to be a huge task, because providing a framework that's good enough to be able to spin new networks, and also that you can tweak it, like if you want to change, I don't know, to use, for example, if you want to create a new partner chain that supports the EVM or it supports something different, you need to have the proper abstractions to do so. But if there is a framework where I could say, okay, I want to create this new network, it needs to be supported by this amount of service providers, and I want to connect my network to Ethereum and Solana and, well, Cardano, of course, then you have like an ecosystem. You can bring developers, you can move assets all around, you can bridge them from one chain to the other. So I think that's, at least it's quite interesting to create new use cases, right?
Amazing. But so we're going to have all these really cool partner chains that they are going to do all this great stuff. So what happens like if everyone's, like all the users, not developers, but users start to use all the partner chains instead of using Cardano directly? Is that like an issue? Is that a good thing? No one cares?
I actually think that we shouldn't care, because really kind of like if you kind of like go back and ask or check some of the answers of people that have been in Web3 for a while, kind of like one of the biggest goals that they had was to go mainstream, and that especially the entire thing about ubiquity, that blockchain as a whole, Web3, was doing things in the back without the final user knowing. Like, I sincerely don't want my mom to know that she's using a dApp. For her, it's just kind of like some sort of a screen that she's interacting somehow, and then things happen in the background. And also, like everything, like as partner chains, we're all still kind of like share a lot of core technologies, and there's going to be a huge intersection, for example, right now between Midnight and Cardano, and that's going to continue there. So if the partner chains grow, they're still going to keep pushing Cardano ahead. And if, like, let's say if right now we have X final users with Cardano, and then partner chains kind of like move it to 10x, still Cardano is going to get the benefit. So you may get, like, let's say a little smaller piece of the pie, but the pie is going to be so much bigger that why do you care?
Yeah. I would add that for me the interesting part of partner chains and side chains is this idea of app chains, where you can customize things for a specific use case, because I believe that's the path for enterprise adoption. I think that companies, industries, they need a way to customize their flows for their specific use case, and they need to have a certain level of control of what is happening, but they also need to connect from time to time to a general purpose public ledger like another one like Cardano. But by having this framework where you can easily spin up these things that solve a single thing, you're not, it's not a zero-sum game. You're opening up to new use cases that probably will end up bringing more activity everywhere. So, yeah.
Amazing. Okay, so like we have a bunch of developers here, and we want enterprise developers as well. Those are nice as well. So, like, what can we do
Java
to
and C#.
Yeah, we have to create a C# library. Oh God. So, what can we do to encourage adoption from developers to build these app chains, partner chains, like, and start creating this like big ecosystem? Anyone that wants to answer?
You should answer that one with education. I don't know. Maybe you
Okay.
can talk a little bit.
Ask whatever you need. Let me know.
Well, I have to take that one just because that's kind of like one of the goals of Midnight.
Okay.
So, if you kind of like pay attention, one of the reasons why Midnight exists is because of regulations. So you're going to have, let's say, a bank. They want to share some information. They want to make it decentralized. They want to make it transparent, immutable. So everything that blockchain kind of like brings to the table. But at the same time, it's like they still have to kind of like abide by the regulations of the country, the continent, European Union, whatever it is. And then they cannot give all their data just to expose it and put it on chain. So pretty much one of the reasons of the existence of Midnight is to give like some corporate like developers the opportunity to just kind of like say like, look, I can decide. So of course, just how Santi was kind of like mentioning, every single partner chain is going to have a different use case scenario, a different focus, a different niche, and then perhaps the solution there or the answer in order for other partner chains are going to be different. But specifically with Midnight, we are already kind of like providing like enterprise developers kind of like something right there. Like it's almost like any developer can use it, and we have here many use cases just in this room. But one of the biggest goals is to connect with those enterprise developers, like at least for Midnight. Apart from that, yeah, I'm going to echo you too, education. And I think at some point during the weekend we were talking about like some of the, I think questions or kind of like difficulties with Midnight. And it comes down to people not knowing enough about zero knowledge. You know, because it's something a little bit different. So then we go back and like, how do we solve that? Well, we have to give them the material, we have to educate them, we have to make them think in a different way. And I think that's going to be true for other angles or other kind of like use cases for other partner chains there.
Right. So regarding what you just said, yeah. So education, an example that they could follow, and maybe some nice tooling will help a lot.
Yes.
So we can also do like ZK directly on Cardano. Like I've seen implementations, and it technically works, but like why should I choose to use a Midnight or any other ZK partner chain, or you like do ZK directly on Cardano?
Okay, yeah, like, okay, well, that one directly, mostly because Midnight was built for that. You know, whenever you're kind of like doing that, you're going to have a team dedicated to keep improving the solution. So I've seen it. I think it was Fasten Gilmore from Paima. He already kind of like made it quite clear. Like I saw it in the news a couple of weeks ago. Kind of like first CK contract that is on Cardano, et cetera, and that works. You know, but like he is not a regular developer. He's not your typical developer. Quite likely, and many other developers, like I've mentioned before, they don't want to think about that. They just want to think about like the use case that they have in front of them. And if you already have a team like Midnight's, things like the latency, like incorporating like new features, things like that, they don't really have to think about that. So like it's not just the level of abstraction, but having a team that is dedicated just to that is the laser focus, if you will.
Thank you. So, like, speaking of all these technologies, and we have so many things going on in Cardano. So we have this, we have Leos, we have a bunch of like really cool stuff that you could be working on, but you choose partner chains and zero knowledge, specifically one of you. Like, why do you think it's better to invest resources, time, and developers in partner chains specifically instead of improving other aspects of Cardano?
Well, I think that my previous answer applies here too. I think that giving teams, developers, and mainly enterprise teams the ability to customize networks into specific use cases is the way that we can onboard more activity into Cardano. But it doesn't mean that we have to stop improving the L1. By no means. I think that we need to squeeze as much throughput as we can, and for sure we need to invest resources. But it's not that we need to pick one or the other. On the front of improving Cardano, we always hear talks about throughput and layers. One thing that I would mention in that path is that for me, finality, which is one of the other issues that we currently suffer as developers, building the apps in Cardano should be probably higher in priority than throughput, or at least that's my personal opinion. So yes, let's keep improving the L1 because we need it to be as fast and as performant as possible, but it doesn't mean that we should avoid going out there and onboarding new teams that can customize their own use cases and connect into the L1.
So
Yeah.
I want to add something on top of what Santi said.
Sure.
Sometimes you need to do one thing and do it very well, right? So you need to provide primitives to others to do whatever they want to. But in the end, if you do one thing and you do it really, really well, and your network has been running for several years without any interruption, well, that's good enough, right? And you need to provide options to others to build whatever they need, right? So I think that might be a little bit of the answer. And regarding enterprises, I think most of the companies, their business is not to use cool tech, right? Their business is selling stuff or doing whatever they do, right? So providing the proper tool for them to earn money should be the way. And that providing the tools so their life is easier, right? Building something that they can put within a queue to production and they can use and they can earn more money.
Yeah, with an SLA.
Exactly.
So like we have like enterprise customers, like you mentioned twice already enterprise. There's any sectors that should be like the first adopter, so that looks like could be the first adopter, or is like because of the the amount of flexibility that you have with partner chains doesn't matter. Health, banking, whatever, anything could work.
Yeah, I think it doesn't matter, although Midnight has some, I'm going to let Diego to explain them, some very interesting use cases that are enabled by that technology, as opposed to using other networks or even Cardano, right? So if you want to comment, but healthcare and...
Yeah, actually, it was quite funny because like when we kind of like started, let's say almost last year, we made a list of use cases. We went for like what we expected, the usual suspects, you know, that it was going to happen. So DeFi was kind of like almost at the top. It makes sense, you know, like almost any aspect of crypto usually is connected to DeFi one way or another. So like it was a no-brainer. But then we started like talking with our developers, and we wanted to kind of like know, and you just mentioned it, Alan, healthcare kept appearing over and over and over. And it was mostly because you don't really have a hard time to kind of like explain to someone that patients and almost anyone else, like doctors, hospitals, or like insurance partners there, like they want to kind of like abide by the rules of every country and keeping privacy. I think we're in an era where privacy is kind of like incredibly important, and we kind of like throw it all the way around, and you don't really have to convince anyone that is like, hey, I don't want people to know if I have a chronic disease, for example. So then, because there are such strict regulations in many different continents and countries specific, then healthcare kept appearing over and over as one of those things that people wanted to build on. But we have seen other things. Like personally, one of the ones that was really interesting for me was one of the teams that had participated in a previous hackathon, and they actually are in India, and they are kind of like building a proof of concept for one of these Indian states to kind of like move a lot of their forensic information to, Midnight. So then it's something that, to be honest, I was not thinking about like CSI, like crime investigation or something like that. But at the same time, the first time, that was my reaction. That's really cool. I really want to kind of like see that project coming, because it's kind of like a use case. And not just that, it really has a real problem, and in many cases, millions of problems, because we're talking about millions of crimes and investigations, and then it moves all the way to like even the jury system, like the trying the cases, because then you have to show proof, not of concept, but of chain of all this evidence that has been collected. So, but if all that is in a clear, transparent way, then you're going to kind of like avoid things like corruption, or kind of like the suddenly like evidence for an important case suddenly disappears, which kind of like happens in many countries. So something like that, it really blew my mind away. But at the end of the day, we are going to have some things like, well, DeFi there, but there are like so many use cases that quite likely we have not even thought about it right now. And then 1 year, if you ask me exactly the same thing, quite likely I'll have like better examples to give you.
Perfect, thank you so much. So, final question for all of you, and then I'm not sure if we have time for Q&A, but I think with this, I think everyone was enlightened by this conversation, hopefully. So, what advice would you give young developers that want to get started, either like have their own startup on top of Cardano, creating their own partner chains on top of Midnight? Like, what advice will you give them to give them like a good head start?
Learn Cibor? I don't know.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I don't know. I think that make sure that you enjoy what you're doing, because you will be doing it for a long time, and it will require a lot of effort. But I think that if as developers, usually we tend to focus on the technology, and we try to find a problem for a solution. So we like this technology, so let's see what I can build with this. But the focus is the technology. What I would tell my own self from several years ago is that instead of that, you should be focusing on the problem that you want to solve, and just let the technology be the one that is best suited for that particular task, and not the other way around, which is what we usually do when a new shiny framework or something appears and we just want to try it out. So, yeah.
Valuable advice. Thank you.
I actually heard Santi's answer, and I think it changed my answer like 3 times while you were. But then going back a little bit to like what I would give my own self, my younger self advice, go to hackathons. And that's for different reasons. One, you are forced to be social. You really have to kind of like create teams. And this is something that I think most developers sometimes we feel that we have to solve everything ourselves. But in the real world, you are always in a team. You know, like you are, even it could be just like your co-founder, but still you are kind of quite likely not solving the problem yourself. Like you are really kind of working with others. And sometimes we can be, I think sometimes we have a little bit almost like the doctor's God complex that is like, I can solve it all by myself. And really kind of like if you pay attention to the biggest companies right now, we are not talking about one developer. Perhaps that's how they started. But then over time, you're going to have gigantic teams. So if you're able to function inside of a team, that's always a great advantage. Sometimes you may not be the best developer, but you are the best collaborator. And then you are going to push your team forward and then everyone wins. And then the other thing is that in hackathons, well, not only you have fun, but also you are kind of like really trying to focus, like you said, in the problem. It's not that I just think that the technology is cool. It's like, hey, I have to figure it out. And then lastly, something that we developers sometimes suck at is to really express what is the solution and what is the problem. So if you do a pitch in front of other people, you are forced to do it in 4 or 5 minutes. And if you're going to do that in a hackathon, quite likely you're going to do better when you have to explain the same problem or the same issue in front of your manager. Because then you are going to be able to say like, look, I spent 1 month of my life doing this because there was this problem. Not just because I thought that it was a cool new feature, but it's like really the company, the organization, our users, our clients needed this, and I was solving it. So just having that ability, I think it's amazing. And I think in a control-friendly environment like a hackathon where everyone is having fun, it's a perfect opportunity for you to kind of like explore and improve all those skills. So, yeah.
Thank you. Alan?
So I'm happy because I still share tons of ideas with Santi. So I was having this conversation with someone that's about to release the app soon. And I was challenging him, like, why haven't you done this like this way? And he told me something that was really interesting. I didn't want to overcomplicate stuff. I just wanted to release. I just want to release, and if it's a good market fit, then I have time to make things more complex. And actually, sometimes it's more complex to make things simple, right? And you need to cut corners. So you don't need to fall in love with the technology. You need to fall in love with what you want to build. I found myself several times trying to implement the same kind of thing in weird languages that I find in Hacker News. And that's a bad idea. If I want to try something new, I just speak the language that I know or the tools that I know and try to make it simple, right? So I think that's the main idea. And that goes in line with hackathons. You have like a short amount of time to deliver something. So make it simple, make it nice, and be able to express the idea. And then most likely you will get a prize, I think.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So I'm not sure, Jose, should we finish it? Do we have time for a Q&A? Yeah? Anyone has questions for our panel? We have one there, and we need a microphone.
Hello, thank you. My question is about tooling, right? So right now ICANN solves on-chain really well, but off-chain is a little bit on the side. IoT never delivered the PAB. Mesh is slow at high throughput. Lucid was sort of abandoned. So I was wondering for the off-chain part, are there any tools that is under development and some help there?
Do we have like 2 hours? Or yeah, we were talking about exactly that yesterday. We were discussing if the off-chain part, when you're building the app, should be on the client, should be on the browser, and the browser should do everything? Or can you put that complexity in some sort of backend and call an API and get the transaction and then sign it? I'm more on the side that we should try to make a little bit more use of the backend. In Cardano, the apps, we kind of defaulted in a way where everything needs to run in the browser, and I think that there's a lot of ways to improve things without losing the centralization or security. Yes, today we have a rainbow of transaction builders. I would say, personally, I would like to focus on transaction building and backend systems that try to hide a little bit that complexity. In a similar way as we were talking about Midnight, like it hides the complexity of zero knowledge in a layer of abstraction. I think that we should push for that in the ecosystem.
Thank you so much. Any other question? Perfect. So, thank you so much for everyone in the panel. Please, applause.
Muchas gracias.
Well, now we are going to take a little break until the 4. So relax a little bit, and we will be waiting for you for much.
largo. Hola, hola. Vamos entrando y nos tomemos asiento, por favor, para alargar la segunda parte.
Ay, venía a hacer eso, muchas gracias.
No encontraba el
Ah, tranquilo.
botón.
Es que se prenden de abajo y yo los había
Sí.
apagado.
Sí. Ahí lo
Y el atril ya puedes hablar tranquilamente.
Nos acomodamos, que ya vamos a alargar. Hay gente afuera todavía, que vayan pasando. Buenas tardes a aquellos que acaban de llegar. Hay gente nueva, gente que estuvo aproximándose recién, después de este coffee break. Vamos a avanzar con la segunda parte. Nos quedan 2 paneles bastante interesantes y con la presencia en breves instantes de Charles Hoskinson, así que estamos aguardando su llegada. Vamos a avanzar con el panel Enhancing Public Education Through Digital Transformation, con Luis Escaso, de la Organización de Estados Iberoamericanos, Rafael Fraga, de la Cardano Foundation, Guillermo Oliveto, de la Universidad Tecnológica Nacional, y Luciano Carreón, de ESERI. Por favor, un fuerte aplauso para ellos. Va a moderar el panel José Yadichico. José Yadichico va a moderar el panel, el organizador uno de los organizadores del evento y el ingeniero a cargo de Ada Solar. Muchas gracias.
Y amigo.
¿Este funciona?
Sí. Tenemos un micrófono más. Bueno, muy buenas tardes. Mi nombre es José Javier Yadichico. Un placer tenerlos aquí. Y bueno, hoy tenemos este panel de lujo de grandes amigos con los que venimos trabajando hace ya bastante tiempo. Y básicamente, bueno, quiero aprovechar unos minutitos para contar un poco sobre la idea de, ahora estamos cerrando ya lo que es la Tech Week. El propósito de este evento fue justamente apoyar a lo que es la Constitutional Convention de Cardano, un evento histórico a nivel global, donde vamos a definir la constitución on-chain de Cardano en los próximos días. Así que hoy vamos a estar cerrando la Cardano Tech Week y lanzando la Cardano Governance Week en breve con Charles Hoskinson en un panel. Así que bueno, vamos a comenzar. Acá tenemos referentes de educación. Vamos a empezar con nuestro amigo Luis Escaso, de la Organización de Estados Iberoamericanos, una organización que conocimos hace muy poco y probablemente muchos de ustedes no conozcan tampoco. Entonces, quiero invitarlo a Luis a que nos cuente un poquito qué es la OEI. Ellos tienen una frase que es: hacemos que la cooperación suceda. Y al principio no había entendido, pero luego me di cuenta de lo importante que es la cooperación, sobre todo en un evento como en este, donde tenemos múltiples organizaciones. Tenemos a IOG, tenemos Cardano Foundation, tenemos Midnight, tenemos Intersect, tenemos la UTN, tantas instituciones que a veces se solapan, sobre todo en un sistema descentralizado, y se repiten esfuerzos, o las direcciones de los esfuerzos van en sentidos por ahí no complementarios, incluso hasta a veces en sentidos opuestos. Entonces, ahí entendí un poco la importancia de hacer que la cooperación realmente suceda. Así que Luis, bienvenido, muchísimas gracias.
Hola, ahora sí. Buenas tardes, muchas gracias por la invitación y por el interés en conocer la OI, en escuchar un poco lo que tenemos para contar. Creo que siempre es positivo cuando alguien recibe una invitación y le dicen, me interesa lo que están haciendo, ¿no? Da cierta satisfacción. Y en el caso de la OI, todavía más, porque si bien somos la organización de cooperación internacional más antigua de la región y con mayor presencia regional, somos poco conocidos. La OI se fundó hace 75 años, cumplimos este año 75 años. Tiene presencia física en 20 países, su sede en Madrid y representaciones diplomáticas en 20 países, casi 3.000 personas trabajando, más de 400 programas de cooperación en los países de la región, y somos poco conocidos. Pero debemos decir que eso es parte de nuestro ADN y de nuestra forma de hacer las cosas. En general no invertimos ni un centavo en comunicación y en publicidad. No voy a decir nombres, pero ustedes conocerán un montón de organismos internacionales que uno va por la calle y dice done con su tarjeta. Y uno sabe, escucha esas siglas y dice, ¿vos conocés esa institución? Sí, la conozco. ¿Qué hace? No sé bien, pero hace cosas con tal o cual situación. A la OI, si vos le preguntás a la gente de la calle, no la conocen, pero los que nos conocen saben lo que hacemos, porque nuestra actividad está enfocada en el hacer, más que en el decir. En nuestras reuniones de ministros no se aprueban declaraciones. Habrán escuchado, declaración de la organización tal, los ministros reunidos en tal ciudad, considerando, 35 considerando. Hace poco hubo una reunión multilateral y se aprobó una declaración con 100 puntos. Nosotros no queremos una declaración con 100 puntos, queremos una declaración con un solo punto y que ese punto se haga. Acabamos de terminar la reunión de nuestro Consejo Directivo de Ministros en Madrid, aprueba las cuentas, la auditoría. ¿Y qué aprueba? Un programa y presupuesto que dice 10 cosas que se van a hacer, con qué dinero se van a hacer, con quiénes se va a hacer y dónde se va a hacer. Así trabajamos nosotros. Uno de los puntos aprobados que va a ser uno de los ejes vertebradores de nuestro trabajo los próximos 2 años se basa en la transformación digital en la región. Y de eso, si quieren, hablamos después. Pero bueno, esto es un breve perfil, como habrán notado, bastante informal, porque es así como somos nosotros.
Muchísimas gracias, Luis. No sé si querés extender un poquito más sobre los proyectos que la OEI viene trabajando. Ya nos has contado varios, tienen mucha relación con lo que es educación.
Sí. Nosotros trabajamos en 3 áreas fundamentalmente, a la cual se agrega una cuarta. Educación en todos los niveles, desde primera infancia hasta educación superior. En todos los aspectos de la educación, desde alfabetización de adultos, recordemos que en nuestra región todavía hay 30 millones de analfabetos, a programas de vanguardia que tienen que ver con tecnología, educación, inteligencia artificial, etcétera, etcétera. Trabajamos en ciencia, básicamente con el fondo puesto en innovación científica tecnológica y en lo que se llama vinculación. La vinculación es la relación que se establece entre los centros de investigación científica y las unidades productivas, que son las empresas. Muchas veces, y esto en América Latina es muy común, que quienes investigan, sea con fondos públicos o privados, están lejos de las empresas y del sector privado que necesitan nutrirse de ese conocimiento para mejorar sus capacidades productivas. Trabajamos en programas y proyectos culturales, donde si bien nos hacemos cargo de la herencia cultural de la región y la diversidad que tiene, que es mucha y es uno de nuestros grandes potenciales, uno de nuestros grandes valores, si quieren más tarde hablamos un poco de ese tema, en lugar de quedarnos analizando sobre la diversidad cultural y la riqueza de la diversidad, que eso es importante, tratamos de trabajar en poner eso en valor. ¿En valor? ¿En qué valor? En valor social y en valor económico, porque nuestros países necesitan desarrollarse. Entonces trabajamos fuerte sobre el eje de industrias creativas y culturales, que parte de eso tiene que ver con el trabajo que hacen ustedes, exportación de bienes y servicios culturales, y la transformación de esas cadenas de valor que están ocultas y que tienen que ver con la cultura en valor económico, empleo y desarrollo. Y finalmente trabajamos en la intersección de todos estos componentes y lo que se entiende por productividad. Nuestra región tiene un grave problema de productividad, tiene bajísimas tasas de productividad que no mejoran a lo largo de los años. En otro panel, hace unos meses atrás, con empresarios, me preguntaban cómo considerábamos nosotros que se pagaba la deuda externa. La deuda externa se paga con productividad, se paga con la generación de valor. No hay otro atajo para pagar una deuda, que es producir más con lo mismo. Para producir más con lo mismo, en una sociedad que tiene al conocimiento como uno de los elementos críticos que generan el crecimiento económico, tenemos que mejorar nuestra relación con el conocimiento. El 60% de las empresas latinoamericanas no consiguen mano de obra calificada para los puestos de trabajo que mencionan. Y el desempleo juvenil en la región es de los más altos del mundo. Quiere decir, los jóvenes no consiguen trabajos y las empresas no consiguen trabajadores calificados. ¿Qué pasa ahí? Bueno, sobre eso es sobre lo que llamamos la atención. Y cuando hablamos de productividad significa trabajadores, empresas y gobiernos trabajando juntos para mejorar esas condiciones de lo que se llama capital humano, pónganle el nombre que quieran, que básicamente son las capacidades que tienen las sociedades para poner su conocimiento en valor, su conocimiento en acción. No sé si con este resumen estamos.
Perfecto, clarísimo, clarísimo.
Muy bien.
Bueno, y hablando de la OEI, hace muy poco organizamos el Cardano Summit junto a Charles Hoskinson en la casa de Luis, así que queremos agradecer ahora nuevamente por habernos invitado. Y tenemos también aquí a Rafael Fraga, referente de Cardano Foundation, responsable para Latinoamérica, que también fue parte de esa colaboración. Así que Rafa, bienvenido. Contanos un poco la visión de Cardano Foundation para Latinoamérica y lo que venimos trabajando.
Claro, muchas gracias José, muchas gracias a todos que están acá presentes. Para nosotros de la Fundación Cardano es obviamente un placer enorme no solamente colaborar con proyectos del ecosistema de Cardano, pero también con el desarrollo económico, social y tecnológico de países que nosotros estamos trabajando, como acá en Argentina, Brasil y muchos otros en América Latina. Empezamos en una fuerza muy grande no que se fala del tema de la educación. La educación es uno de los 3 pilares que trabajamos en la fundación, con también la operación resiliente y la adopción institucional de la tecnología blockchain. Pero al analizar la estrategia de cómo alcanzar la adopción institucional de blockchain, nosotros llegamos a la conclusión que es muy simple, pero no es tan simple de solucionar. Tenemos que educar. Y como Luis ha dicho, nosotros vemos que hoy el mundo quiere desarrollar, el mundo quiere avanzar, tiene la capacidad, pero enfrenta una barrera muy grande que es la falta de conocimiento. Una de las grandes iniciativas que la Fundación desarrolló ese año y lanzó para el público general es la Cardano Academy, la Academia de Cardano, que hoy tiene un amplio potencial y que nosotros gustamos de decir de pegar a un chico que no tiene conocimiento con blockchain de Cardano, 0, y transformarlo en un héroe. 0 to hero. Eso es una estrategia que ayudó mucho a hacerlo onboard de muchas, no solamente personas, pero también empresas, gobiernos y universidades. Un ejemplo muy interesante que puedo compartir acá son nuestros parceros formales. Estamos acá con mucho orgullo y honor con Guillermo, que es el decano de la UTN, nuestro primer parcero acá en Argentina, la cual desarrollamos juntamente con el team educacional de IoT, con nuestro gran amigo Robertino, que probablemente está acá también, un curso en Aiken que graduó más de 20 alumnos, estudiantes, y que hoy pueden decir que conocen blockchain, conocen Cardano y se pueden desarrollar en Aiken. Otro parcero formal que nosotros tenemos es con Luis Escaso y la OI, la Organización de los Estados Iberoamericanos. 23 estados que hablan la lengua portuguesa y española. Con eso estamos empezando a estrategiar un approach que será única para desarrollo educacional en todos los países que son parte de OI. Entonces, para la Fundación Cardano y para Cardano como un ecosistema, la educación siempre será lo motor de desarrollo que va a hacerlo on board, pero también que va a diseminar el conocimiento y mitigar todo la más información, desconocimiento. Me encanta mucho decir que la tecnología blockchain, por ser algo muy nuevo, le trae un poco de miedo. Las personas no conocen. Y si nosotros no explicamos, nosotros no tracemos el conocimiento a través de una cultura de onboarding, a través de la educación, como dice, nunca podríamos atingir la adopción institucional como nosotros tenemos ahora. Por lo tema, en Brasil, con la empresa Petrobras, que es la mejor empresa de la América Latina, hacemos lo onboard y estamos haciendo ahora, empezando a trabajar con el sector de recursos humanos, RH de Petrobras, para que 40.000 funcionarios de la empresa estatal de Brasil estén expuestos a Cardano. Eso es la primera vez que Cardano, con una empresa que es una Forbes 500, tiene una exposición tan grande. Entonces nosotros estaremos en menos de 4 meses a 5 meses graduando funcionarios de la empresa Petrobras en Cardano, con certificados, con nuestro parceiro Personsville, internacionalmente reconocidos. Eso es un paso pequeño, creo que sí, pero el resultado es tremendo, es muy grande. Haciendo eso, nosotros estamos expandiendo el escopo, no solamente de la fundación, no solamente de Cardano, no solamente de blockchain, pero de tecnología. Estamos haciendo cada vez más con que tecnologías de punta como inteligencia artificial, IoT, cloud computing y obviamente blockchain no sean más algo desconocido, sean mainstream, sean algo que las personas están no solamente estudiando, pero trabajando, usufruindo y siendo parte de lo cotidiano de vuestras vidas. Eso es la estrategia de Cardano, eso es la estrategia de Fundación Cardano. Queremos que blockchain sea mainstream, pero solamente lograremos a través de la educación.
Muchísimas gracias, Rafael. Quiero hacer un agradecimiento público a Rafael por todas las gestiones que viene haciendo en general en toda Latinoamérica, pero especialmente en Argentina, donde no es fácil desempeñarse y menos siendo de otro país, que su lengua natural no es el español, así que...
Peço perdón por el español.
Bueno, ahora vamos a escuchar al decano del UTN, Guillermo Oliveto, nuestro anfitrión. Gracias, Guillermo, por recibirnos una vez más. Estuvimos hablando estos días y me contó algo que no lo dice, pero yo lo quiero decir. Acaba de recibir un premio por haber creado el Centro de e-Learning de la Universidad Tecnológica hace 20 años. Así que la capacidad visionaria viene de largo. Nos gustaría, Guillermo, que compartas un poquito sobre esa experiencia y cómo terminó impactando en la universidad durante la pandemia.
Bueno, lo primero que quiero decir es gracias. Gracias a Cardano, fundamentalmente. Gracias a cada uno de ustedes por estar acá. Pero gracias a Cardano fundamentalmente simplemente por confiar en una universidad pública como somos nosotros y darnos la posibilidad de establecer esa parcería, como decía el amigo, esa unión, esa alianza estratégica que nos permite a nosotros ser pioneros en el tema blockchain en la Argentina desde el punto de vista educativo. Y eso es importantísimo porque, como bien decía Rafael, ya tenemos 25 estudiantes formados y ahora empieza no solo nuevas cohortes, sino también todo un espacio de desarrollo, que es la parte más interesante de lo que viene. Pero refiriéndome a lo que decía José, es cierto, el viernes cuando arrancó la Cardano Tech Week estuve presente, pero me tenía que retirar porque se cumplieron 20 años del centro de e-learning de la facultad y bueno, como yo fui el mentor de ese centro, la idea era, me iban a entregar un reconocimiento. Pero lo importante de esto es que hace 20 años un grupo de gente se decidió en desarrollar la educación a distancia y eso impactó fuertemente en lo que es la facultad, porque por un lado nos dio la posibilidad de extender nuestros contenidos a distintas partes de la Argentina y a distintas partes de la región de Latinoamérica y fuera de los confines también de Latinoamérica. Y eso luego nos convirtió en la primer facultad en tener campus virtual, no solo extracurricular, sino también académico. Y entonces empezamos a desarrollar el aula virtual para cada cátedra de cada materia de las distintas ingenierías que se cursan en esta facultad, que son 9. Para que se den una idea, nosotros tenemos 15.000 alumnos activos en esta facultad y desde el año ya 2007 tenemos aulas virtuales en todas las materias de las distintas carreras y eso nos ayudó cuando vino la pandemia ya estábamos preparados porque si bien las aulas virtuales eran repositorios digitales, y los docentes, ya había docentes que en el 2008 ponían cuestionarios en línea, que colocaban modelos de parciales, empezaban a trabajar con modelos de evaluación y además ya teníamos las primeras 3 materias de ciencias básicas que se cursaban en forma semipresencial. Eso nos llevó a que cuando estalló la pandemia, bueno, obviamente teníamos armada una buena cantidad de esa defensa que ejerció la universidad, sobre todo la universidad pública, en términos de ir hacia la virtualidad y que ningún estudiante perdiera un solo día de clase. Y eso la verdad que lo logramos gracias a esa idea peregrina de unos años atrás de desarrollar el e-learning dentro de la facultad. Y ahora estamos con este nuevo desafío que yo estoy convencido que hace al futuro de la tecnología, y nosotros tenemos que estar forzosamente en esa especie de cresta de la ola, pero fundamentalmente lo que buscamos nosotros es, en el caso de la aplicación de blockchain, en dar seguridad a las certificaciones que tiene la facultad. Nosotros hoy estamos trabajando no solo en lo que tiene que ver con las materias, sino también con los certificados intermedios y además con los títulos. Yo contaba que nosotros tenemos, doy un ejemplo, una cantidad de gente que año a año, por cuestión de una simple mudanza, cambia de lugar donde vive y extravía su título y su certificado analítico. Y eso es una tragedia en la Argentina, porque eso significa pedir un duplicado, lo que significa pasar algunos meses, porque lo tiene que aprobar no solo la universidad, sino también el Ministerio de Educación, o ahora Secretaría de Educación. Entonces, en buena hora, tener certificados digitales. Y después hay otra cuestión que tiene que ver un poco con lo que contaba Luis de poblaciones vulnerables, que en la Argentina hay mucha, y nosotros tenemos muchos cursos no formales, de educación no formal, y en esto también lo que queremos es que esa educación no formal tenga un certificado digital. No sé si con esto completamos, pero bueno, hay muchas cosas más para decir, ¿no?
Después cualquier cosa más. Muchas gracias, Guillermo. Perfecto. Después podemos dar una vuelta más de... Bueno, ahora nuestro amigo Luciano Carreón, de Grupo Eseri, además amigo, partner de Ada Solar. Bienvenido, Luciano.
Gracias, José.
Bueno, contanos un poquito, ¿qué es Grupo Eseri para los que no conocen?
Bueno, primero, bienvenidos. Para mí un placer compartir el panel con personas tan destacadas como con lo que me toca hoy compartir. Bueno, yo soy Luciano, me dicen Lucho. Yo digo siempre Luciano, solamente me dice mi madre cuando está enojada. Pero si no, es Lucho. Bueno, ¿qué es Grupo Eseri? Hace poco un amigo me dijo, ustedes son un conjunto de locos tratando de hacer cosas imposibles. Y creo que es la definición que más me gustó. ¿Qué hacemos nosotros? Trabajamos en 3 rubros muy distintos, pero que son un ecosistema. Educación, por eso José tuvo el privilegio, yo tuve el privilegio de que José me invite. El otro es sustentabilidad y el otro es energía. Y esto surge simplemente de una definición que tuvimos en una reunión trabajando, que la educación fracasó. La educación en el mundo fracasó. Vivimos en un mundo donde más del 50% vive con menos de $1 por día. Es la primera vez que todos los refugiados y los desplazamientos a nivel global son por cuestiones ambientales y no por guerra. Solamente el 30%, un poco menos, depende cómo se mire, accede a la educación universitaria. Entonces, lo que venimos haciendo evidentemente no funcionó. Y ahí fue cuando empezamos a trabajar en cuestiones de impacto, en trabajar en economía real para resolver problemas reales, que son los problemas que tienen ustedes todos los días. Yo recién miraba lo que nos cuesta sostener la concentración. Me pasa a mí que vas a una reunión y a los 10, 15 minutos ya estás chequeando si te llega un mensaje. ¿No? Que nos cuesta sostener la conversación con otro, la comunicación. Y cuando empezamos la educación, obviamente, fundamos un colegio, gastamos un montón de plata, cometimos errores, Colegio Seri, que está en provincia de Buenos Aires, y tratamos de romper todos esos paradigmas de una educación que uno repite contenido, y de hecho yo ahora podría hacer una apuesta y digo, levante la mano, ¿quién sabe las partes de la célula? Y tal vez levante 1 o 2, y sin embargo fueron 15 años a la escuela, o 16, y ya no recuerdan. Quiere decir que la forma de aprender tampoco sirve más. Sin embargo, nuestros hijos siguen copiando el pizarrón, siguen conectados a pantallas que un PDF, un PPT, pero muy pocos trabajan sobre cómo aprende el cerebro. Y los que tienen hijos, los que tienen sobrinos, chicos más chiquitos, se van a dar cuenta que el problema no está en la universidad, el problema está en nivel inicial, en nivel primario, que es cuando todo arranca y es donde menos invierten los países. Generalmente ustedes van a ver mucha inversión en educación en los ciclos superiores, pero no en los niveles inferiores, que es donde se forma la personalidad y donde la biología dice que se juega el destino de la persona, en cómo se alimenta y en cómo se educa. Pero si no sabemos qué educar, si no sabemos, antes me recuerdo cuando yo iba al colegio, y ustedes se acordarán, uno repetía las capitales del mundo, o tenía los manuales que replicaba conocimientos enciclopédicos, y hoy se aprende de otra manera. Por eso nos cuesta los 15 minutos de concentración. Para eso creamos Lunaris, una plataforma que está en desarrollo. Y imaginen esto, imaginen una educación que no depende de ningún ministerio, de ningún país, de ninguna sede, de ningún programa. Una educación que toma en cuenta los valores de la persona, sus emociones, sus motivaciones, que obviamente está en base blockchain para que todo el conocimiento sea trazable, transparente y se pueda compartir, que a través de inteligencia artificial aprende de la persona y aprende de otros, un sistema colaborativo global a nivel de educación, y todas las personas van a acceder de manera gratuita. Es decir, que cualquier persona, en cualquier lugar del mundo, se podría educar desde el nivel inicial con un sistema que realmente genere una comunidad global. O si ustedes se ponen a pensar, que fue algo que hicimos nosotros, pensamos mucho, la educación es un producto. El que la puede pagar, accede. El que no puede pagar, no accede. Si buscan los líderes mundiales en empresas, en organizaciones, en países, se van a dar cuenta que esas personas seguramente fueron a grandes universidades, tienen posgrados. Los que no, están afuera del sistema. Por eso, más de la mitad de la población a nivel mundial no accede a la educación formal. Realmente uno mira a veces a Argentina, mira a países de América Latina, y a veces seguimos discutiendo problemas viejos. Por eso el grupo de Seri nace como eso, como una respuesta. Yo siempre digo a mi equipo que somos una respuesta, pero real, en la práctica. Por eso hicimos un colegio para probar cómo se hacía, y de ahí aprendimos. Otra área que trabajamos es la sustentabilidad. Tenemos partners estratégicos como Nestlé o como Tetra Pak a nivel mundial, y detectamos que la mayoría de la basura de lo que es producto de consumo final flota en los océanos. Hay un montón de soluciones a nivel global, pero no había nada que sea in situ. No había nada que sea como una máquina de coca que uno tire la basura y me dé un producto que a mí me sirva en el mismo lugar donde son generados. Y así creamos una empresa que se llama Cactus, que la van a ver en el 2025, que también estamos trabajando en conjunto con Ada Solar, que transforma basura en su lugar de origen y la transforma en un producto que es un ladrillo en el mismo lugar. Imaginen, por ejemplo, en un país de África donde la gente tira los desechos en el agua donde después toma. Imaginen que ya no los tira más ahí, que lo tira una máquina, que esa máquina en 3 minutos le da un ladrillo, lo hace gratis y construye su casa. ¿Cuánto baja la mortalidad infantil en ese país? ¿Cuánto mejora la calidad constructiva y la vivienda de la gente? Estas son soluciones de economía real, pero que utilizan toda la tecnología que un poco une esta comunidad. Nosotros creemos, y me adelanto una pregunta seguramente que José va a tener, ¿Para qué sirve la tecnología? Sirve para solucionar problemas, si no, no sirve para nada. Esa es la visión que tiene el Grupo ESERI y eso es lo que estamos trabajando. Y por último, viendo que había un problema de energía, y ahí sí tenemos el privilegio de aprender de grandes personas como José y todo su equipo, detectamos también que hoy la inteligencia artificial está demandando el 2% de la energía a nivel mundial. Eso, según datos oficiales, va a superar el 6% para el 2030. Hay un problema energético grave a nivel mundial, hay países que van a la guerra por el tema de la energía, así que con Ada Solar estamos creando un campo fotovoltaico en la provincia de San Juan, pero no para abastecer únicamente energía a la red, sino para que en ese lugar empresas y organizaciones se puedan instalar y generar energía limpia para el desarrollo global. Esa fue la idea de creación del Grupo ESERI, responder a situaciones y problemas reales. Y cierro con esto, una frase que otra vez cito a mi madre, voy a tener que ir a terapia. Mi madre siempre me dice, ilusión sin acción es alucinación. Ilusión sin acción es alucinación. Todos los que estamos acá tenemos la oportunidad de ser parte de este cambio. Esa es una cuestión de decisión. Yo los invito especialmente a que sean parte. Gracias, José.
Gracias, Luchito. Muchas gracias. ¿Sabes qué? Aplaudimos a todos, pero no aplaudimos a los que hacen y no hacen publicidad. Vamos a dar un fuerte aplauso a Luis también, por favor.
José, me gustaría decir una palabra.
Por supuesto.
Eso para Luis, para Guillermo, para Luciano y para todos los otros que están acá y que trabajan con los servicios públicos también. Vos ahora son los principales motores de desarrollo para tecnología, son los decisores. Y tener colaboraciones, empezar a utilizar blockchain, Cardano, eso es algo que nunca nos imaginaríamos estar trabajando. Entonces me gustaría más una vez dar un gran aplauso porque esos acá son los verdaderos héroes que están trabajando para trazer la tecnología, para trazer el conocimiento y para trazer blockchain y Cardano para Argentina y para el mundo. Por favor.
Y mirá si la educación funciona, que los graduados, un equipo de graduados del ALBA fueron ganadores del hackathon. Así que... Bueno, no sé si alguien quiere hacer alguna pregunta. ¿Tenemos a alguien? Bueno, los despedimos con un fuerte aplauso. Luis, ¿querés compartir algo más?
¿Se puede?
Sí, sí, por
¿Hay
supuesto.
tiempo?
Sí.
Quería reaccionar brevemente a lo que comentaron los colegas, que estaba escuchando atentamente sus presentaciones, y quería poner una acotación de contexto, que no es menor. Todos ustedes están acostumbrados a trabajar en ambientes tecnológicos y de innovación. No es la realidad de muchas personas. En mi caso, y en el de algunos de los que están aquí, no todos porque hay mucha gente joven, somos la última generación en la historia de la humanidad que va a haber nacido en un mundo analógico. No va a haber otra. El salto es enorme, la humanidad no está preparada para dar ese tipo de saltos. En 1771 se inauguró la primera hilandería que funcionaba con energía hidráulica, 100 bastidores que tejían las 24 horas, los 365 días del año. Uno de los hitos del inicio de la revolución industrial. Registren la fecha, 1771. En 1971 Intel presentaba el primer microchip. 200 años después. Entonces, por qué la educación no funciona, o no funciona en parte, porque la educación nos trajo hasta acá. Nos trajo hasta Cardano, nos llevó hasta la luna y demás. Porque fue concebida para un mundo que ya no existe. No es que cambió, no es que los estudiantes de antes eran mejores, que los docentes de antes eran mejores, que las escuelas eran mejores. Es que estaban más adecuadas al mundo en el cual tenían que trabajar. La humanidad tiene 200.000 años aproximadamente de historia y nunca vivió jamás un cambio de las características que nos toca transitar a la generación que estamos hoy. Así que quería hacer ese comentario, que era una reacción a lo que estaban comentando anteriormente. Acuérdense que yo usé máquina de escribir en la universidad. En mis primeros años usé máquina de escribir y ¿cómo se llamaba? El para borrar, cuando me equivocaba. Liquid paper. Había que pensar de otra manera porque uno tenía que pensar lo que iba a escribir antes de escribirlo. Porque no te podías equivocar. Ahora escribís y lo cambiás.
Qué bueno que mencionás esto, Luis, porque Cardano tomó el mismo approach. Cardano diseñó primero científicamente, hoy con más de 230 papers científicos académicos, antes de diseñar la blockchain. Con lo cual el approach es parecido a lo que mencionas vos. No nos podíamos equivocar y no nos equivocamos. Así que muchísimas gracias. Un fuerte aplauso.
I will remember you, tomorrow we will have the Stake Pool Operator Lab in this place, in the ALBA, and the other labs for blockchain applications from 9 a.m. in English, 4 hours until 13, and from 14 until 18 in Spanish. So please come to the Stake Pool Operator Lab and bring your laptop for practicing. Okay, this is the last panel and the most expected panel. This panel is called 2025, the Year of Cardano, presenting Charles Hoskinson from IOG. Please come up. Yes. Okay. Please take a seat. With Frederick Gregard, too, from Cardano Foundation. Please welcome. Is JJ Seiler here? Oh, he's stuck. JJ is stuck. Welcome again to Rafael Fraga, please. I won't forget you. '25, the year of Cardano.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I came here 2 months ago for the graduation.
It's a heavy panel for me, actually. I'm very honored to be here, but the show is for those guys here. Can I say hey, everybody? So welcome everybody, and we're gonna kick off the last panel of the day, and it's a pleasure to me, it's an honor to be hosting this panel here as a moderator. But like I said, the show is for these two guys here, Frederick Gregard, the CEO of Cardano Foundation, and of course, Charles Hoskinson, the CEO of IOG. And it's a very special day today, because we are kicking off our constitutional convention. We are kicking off a dream that came true right now, and we are kicking off a new era for Cardano. So starting with this topic here, I would like to start with Charles. Can you just say some words about how and why this constitutional convention is important for Cardano, and the reflect of this constitution in the next couple of years, it's something that you, in your creation, see as a positive outcome for the whole ecosystem, I mean the blockchain industry?
So it's been a long ride. You know, you look at these banners, and they're not just banners, they're life. It's 10 years of my life. And we started in very humble origins, a little office in Osaka, and it's grown into a movement that now has millions of people in more than 100 countries. And we've gotten to a point where Cardano can do complicated things. And that's awesome because you can solve hard problems, but when you could do complicated things, you also can break things and you can undo all the great progress that Cardano has made. So governance is risky, and to help ameliorate that risk, you have to put some basic rules into place, and you have to build a diverse set of institutions to help you deal with the complexity and the realities of decentralized governance. So we knew that as we exited the first iteration of the journey, we'd have to bring the entire community together and write a constitution. And the challenge is that it's not typically done. In fact, we brought a special guest here, Mark Meckler, and he's trying to do an Article 5 constitutional convention in the United States. And Mark's been at it for more than a decade, and he's got 19 states to pass a law to hold a convention. And I think he needs about 34, so he's well on his way there. And we haven't had a constitutional convention in the United States for 230 years. So it kind of gives you a sense of how, you know, much effort is required for something like that. So when you think about this, you say to yourself, okay, this is not commonly done. Not many people have this skill set. And when it is done, it's a very involved affair, and it requires you to find great talent and get them to care about it enough to actually invest the time and the effort and work with each other. But the payoff is enormous because you create a foundational set of rights and ground rules that if you write them the right way, you can refer to them year after year, decade after decade, century after century, and they get refreshed and renewed, and they ensure that everybody who uses a system has a common understanding of what the system is for and what it's not for, and it's an essential component for effective governance. So after 230 workshops over a 2-year period, with both SIP 1694 plus the 63 workshops for the Constitution itself, we now have a room filled with all these delegates from all these different places. And in Kenya, we have another convention because visas are hard. And both groups are working together. And over the next few days, hopefully we're able to converge to a candidate that then gets to be ratified on chain. So it's as inclusive as we can possibly get for where we're at. And what's nice is there's been tens of thousands of people from the foundation to the community in general who have had a chance to participate, comment, and many alternative views on where things need to go. And if they can converge to a consensus, then I think we have a very strong founding document for the ecosystem upon which a government can flourish. But more importantly, we've now trained up so many people across the ecosystem to think about governance as a first-class citizen. So they now know how to have workshops. They now know how to communicate about these things. They understand the difference between negative liberties and positive liberties. They understand what a constitution should have and not have, how to write a good preamble. And I think that's an asset that's going to keep on giving, because those people are young leaders who will become very senior over time. And each and every one of them is a bastion of knowledge and excellence that will allow Cardano to continue to evolve and grow.
And Fred, could you complement Charles' answer, saying like, what is the difference between like the governance model that we are creating right now with other blockchains?
Yeah, well, most blockchains are a bit stuck, right? So they do one thing really well, and most of them also sort of given up on actually doing complicated governance and complicated actions. And I think Cardano is really pushing the limit here, and they're really redefining that there must be an acceptance of, before this technology has any value, people need to use it. If people uses it, we are not code, and we act, you know, in certain ways. We have biases and so on. And I think what the community really put together is a good way, so a minimal viable way to really get good governance and respect that people are using the technology to change the world forever. And this is a really big stretch goal. And I think, you know, as Charles said, this idea that people are being upgraded to think about governance and have a voice and be responsible for that voice and get direct feedback from the blockchain about that voice is how we're going to redefine society around the world. So I think this is a very proud moment for Cardano.
This is really impressive, and what we could achieve in a very short period of time when it comes to the workshops and the whole effort of the community, it's something impressive that we really need to feel honored to have this amazing community that we have, and also it's amazing protocol. So regarding...
I want to
Yes,
introduce DJ. Please, go up.
So when it comes to the goals that Cardano has, Charles, for 2025, can you dive in a little bit and give maybe some alpha what you have in mind for Cardano in 2025?
Well, you know, I speak on behalf of IOG, and what's nice is now that we're decentralized, there has to be a consensus of the mind about the roadmap. And what's cool is that Swarm Intelligence is going to produce a very, very nice roadmap. So there's a lot of different directions we can go. But I do believe that the most productive things we can do is cleaning up some of the unfinished business that we need to get out of the way. For example, there's a desperate need of a new node. So there's right now a very monolithic architecture with the Haskell node, which is quite secure and quite robust, but it's rather inflexible when you talk about a broad tent ecosystem. So everything from I want to do multi-chain staking to I want a really efficient light client to I want something that works well with exchanges. I want something that works in a cell phone or in a browser. You don't get to choose your own adventure with a node architecture like that. So it was built to bootstrap the ecosystem, but it wasn't built to be everything to everyone. So microservices and modularity is something that people have used to solve this. And when you look at things like, for example, Firefly, the supernode architecture in Hyperledger, that's a direction or executable extensions that's being done in the Ethereum ecosystem. That's one thing. So I think a fresh approach is required, and we've been trying to figure out if it makes sense for Pragma to do that in parallel with Intersect, where Intersect would take the legacy node and Pragma could take the new node, and then you can do parallel construction with parallel teams, and then you kind of get some newness in the thinking, and then you create a larger base of core developers, so you achieve a multi-client paradigm and more developer diversity, and that's important. Second, I think Cardano has a unique opportunity to get out of this, are you the Ethereum killer narrative, which everybody was pushing for in 2021, and actually get into a much more productive, constructive narrative, which is we can add value to something. In this case, being the DeFi layer of Bitcoin. With the movement actually mostly built here in Argentina by people like Sergio Lerner, with Fairgate, and a few others, they've figured out with Taproot how to embed smart contracts into Bitcoin. Not at the same level of programmability that Cardano has or Ethereum has, but enough to build trustless bridging technology, which functionally means if you do it in just the right way, you can seamlessly move Bitcoin from Bitcoin to Cardano and back, and you can use Cardano as the DeFi layer of Bitcoin. And this is unique because Bitcoin has over $2 trillion of assets, there's tens of billions of dollars of trading, and governments like the United States are considering it as a sovereign asset where they'll create a strategic reserve. I'll remind you the US government has 212,000 Bitcoin. They just got it through civil asset forfeiture, and if they just decide overnight, they can just put it on the balance sheet. So make US government a bigger holder than Saylor. So that's a really unique thing, and for Cardano to be part of that story is quite natural, because we're extended UTXO, they're UTXO, we're kind of where Bitcoin would have went if they could upgrade. So a Bitcoin developer doesn't really have to do very much to understand where we're coming from, whereas an Ethereum developer has a bit of a translation because of the differences in the accounting model. So that's a very untapped market, and it's 4 times the size of Solana and Ethereum combined together. So I think it's a huge market to get involved in. And third, just listen to the community. You know, we talk about scalability. Laos will come, and it's following a very fast path. But in the interim, in parallel, there's all these amazing things like Midgard and Gummy Worm and ZK Fold, which the communities come up with as extensions of things or new things onto themselves that really showcase the investments we've made. The roll-ups on extended UTXO, they work so much better than an account model. They're a lot more secure. They're a lot faster. So let's go take advantage of that as an ecosystem. Or Hydra, you know, we opened up this amazing capability with Hydra Doom, but now it can be applied towards DEXs or micropayments or all kinds of things which require a lot of throughput and fast finality. And the community is ready to do that. So embrace these guys and get them into market in 2025, get Laos into market in 2026. And I think that's a beautiful scalability roadmap because you've left no one behind in that. And then finally, Midnight, I think, is the entry point for the entire partner chains paradigm of this idea of Cardano securing a sister network that does a service that's sold to the entire cryptocurrency space. That's a very unique and new way of looking at things because typically your sidechains model serve the master. So you have like Cosmos or Polkadot where you have one universal consensus and the parachains augment the master system, the base chain. It's a very inward look of how interoperability works. Whereas what we're doing is an outward look. So Ouroboros will secure it, but with multi-resource consensus, you can get security from many other systems, and the bridges allow the other systems to consume the services of that ledger. So your partner chains look like a layer 2 to everyone. So Midnight will look like a layer 2 to Midnight and Solana and Cardano and other systems. And what that means is we become the interoperability layer of the entire cryptocurrency space and the place where all the decentralized services live. And there's a very natural set of dApps in Cardano that can upgrade into this paradigm, like Iagon, for example, or others whom we've talked to. So I think that's a really amazing portfolio. You get a lot of community-driven innovation. You get new nodes which are built to be choose your own adventure, so they're much more modular and they're easier to develop and faster to develop and have much better interfaces. You get to be the DeFi layer of Bitcoin. You get this new paradigm partner chains. If we could get all of that done and still clean up all the technical debt and get some of these things like Genesis and Paris out and continue this governance journey, I don't see how anybody can top that. It's a really holistic roadmap. But that's kind of our view of it, and it needs to be discussed now with the on-chain government, and there has to be a path and a process for people to get comfortable with this, and ultimately they'll make that decision. We do have two big governance things we have to do in 2025 to close this up. The Constitution has to be ratified, so whatever's decided here, if we can converge, it still has to be voted on-chain, which means every single Cardano holder has consent. Okay. The second thing is the budget. We have to figure that out. And that's always hard because it's the first type of budget. And it's the first time we've done this as an ecosystem. It's a little easier at $1.20 ADA than it was at 35 cent ADA. It's not as big of a fight, but it still has to get done. And in particular, we cannot allow the fact that there's been a depreciation of the asset to get in the way of good governance and oversight. Equally important to the outflow of cash is the audit and oversight of the deployment of the capital. And we have to kind of figure out governance structures that are off-chain that allow us to make sure that the people who receive funding to do work do it in accordance with the standards and will of the community. And because this is the first time, we don't have a turnkey model to do that. We have to kind of build one and experiment, and we have to decide what good looks like. Like if you get a C+, is that okay? You get a B, is that okay? Get an A, is that okay with an asterisk or something like that? So expectation management is the big component of all of this. Directionally, we're doing everything right as an ecosystem, but we have to now get picky and a little bit more specific.
Impressive. And as my last question now, to allow my good friend JJ to also collaborate. Fred, we know that the Cardano Foundation has the three core pillars, education, adoption, and operational resilience. Regarding of the three pillars and also the strategy for 2025, but especially in regards to the solutions that the Cardano Foundation will release in 2025, I'm curious about LOB. Can you disclose a little bit the LOB project and how the LOB could be like core for enterprises in the world?
Yeah, so one of the visions for Cardano was really to be a complete different financial operating model of the world. And to do that, you sometimes have to do something which is a bit scary. So actually about, I think, an hour ago, we posted a set of transactions on mainnet, which basically is the earnings statement and the balance statement of the audited financials of the Cardano Foundation. And when I first introduced this idea to our accountants and to our auditors, they ran screaming away because they don't really like that kind of transparency, What about rebookings? And when it's on the blockchain, you can't delete it and all those things. But I think what we're really getting close to now is we're getting close to a very stable mainnet who has multiple opportunities around ICANN, around smart contracts, regarding different use cases. And what we need to do now is we need to start really doing this financial transformation where we really start changing the fabric of what companies stand for. So we are not really doing this for Cardano's sake. We are doing this because we think Cardano can be one of those tools who can actually help the world to grow up and turn everybody from a shareholder into a stakeholder, and give the power to one guy who has one share to go to a general assembly and say, you know, Mr. Chairperson, I have one question. That transaction, what's that all about? Because today most of the world is, you know, already coordinated by the large shareholders and the pension fund, and you don't really have a say and you don't have transparency. So there's something, you know, the General International Accounting Standard is about 20,000 pages. 20,000 pages just in optimizing what trust should look like. And what we're going to do now is we're going to prove that you can actually run something as difficult as the Cardano Foundation by using the Cardano blockchain as an ERP system and turn everybody into a shareholder in our balance sheet and into our control systems. And already this is open source and it's not finished yet, so the community can build on this and refine on that and do queries and that, right? And our hope is that, you know, in the next sort of 12 to 16 months, we get, you know, a big five auditor to basically put their digital identity behind those numbers. That we get other companies like NGOs, like United Nations and others to start using this, to really start changing the narrative of how you lead a company and how you're socially responsible towards that by using the Cardano model as a template.
That's very good. Thank you, Fred. So something that you usually get at one of these panels at the very end is a call to action. And just want to give you guys a second to think here. Of everybody that's assembled, this group touches the entire world. What is your call to action for the folks that are in this room right now? For example, I was looking up some of the delegates and the alternates. Some of you don't have a Twitter account. Some of you don't have an online presence. It would be helpful if you guys had a handle that we could tag. In like a regular way, you guys could participate in spaces. You know, it'd be nice to chat with you. So do you have a call to action? Is there something, is it Intersect? Is it the budget process? Is it applications on chain? Is there something that you would ask that folks here do when they leave the room today? And we could start with Charles.
You know, a call to action, I'd say one of the biggest lessons we've learned in the last 2 years of running the workshops is just how effective the workshops can be, if anything, as an aggregation point to get people who love the ecosystem in the room together, physically together, and have them talking about a common goal. So currently the workshops have been used to deploy on-chain governance, first 1694 and then later the Constitution, but I don't see any reason why that shouldn't continue into 2025. And I'd like to go from one work stream to 5 and have ongoing product workshops, ongoing workshops around marketing, branding, and growth, ongoing workshops about the budget, ongoing workshops about governance, and then innovation workshops. And then basically it's choose your own adventure, and you don't have to belong to a particular organization or be in a particular geography. They come to you. Because that's the other big challenge, is it's very hard for people to travel in many cases, either because of familial or job or visa issues or time. But it's a lot easier for somebody to go for a day or two if the workshop happens to be in their place like Accra or, you know, Nairobi, or if it's in Ho Chi Minh or something like that. And then suddenly you've engaged a community which may be silent but incredibly smart and incredibly capable. We saw this in particular in Japan, where 40% of the ADA supply is still there. In Japan, community is awesome, but they're a bit fragmented from the rest of the world. But when you actually went and engaged, we got incredible feedback and incredible engagement from everybody there. So a call to action would be in trying to figure out how do we get that rolling, and once it's rolling, getting people to participate at that level, because then you get annual feedback of everything of substance. How do we market Cardano? What should Cardano's brand be? Where are areas of obvious growth or partnership we can achieve? What should be on the product roadmap, both in core infrastructure and also things we're missing in the ecosystem that we should make strategic investments in? What should the budget look like on an annual basis? How much should be decided top down, which is one dimension we're exploring for the first time ever. How much should be decided bottom up? That dimension has historically been catalyst. Should there be competition, or should there be more there in that ratio of those things? And finally, for innovation, that's come from me bootstrapping and picking and choosing and saying, hey, I've noticed very vocal companies like Anastasia talking about Midgard, or Sunday talking about Gummy Worm, or the ZK Full guys doing things. That's a great thing to start for inbound innovation and getting it into a structured process. But there's a lot of people that don't have that level of visibility that are doing equally interesting or important things. Like a great example would be the real world asset standard. I forget the company, but they reached out to us just the other day. And for over a year, they've been writing a series of smart contracts that they're planning on open sourcing to allow people to launch real world assets on Cardano with capabilities like dividends and freeze and seize and these types of things. And the only reason it came to us is I was miffed about the whole Wyoming stablecoin thing, where they excluded us and 99% of the industry, including Bitcoin. They selected Stellar, but not Ripple, even though Stellar is a fork of Ripple. So, okay, that's a very strange commission. So they said we didn't have freeze and seize, but it turns out not only do we, the community actually built that capability as a smart contract. But I wasn't aware of that. And it would have been nice to have known that, ahead of time, but they reached out to us. So that's really the call to action is chipping away at the iceberg of the hidden innovation and the hidden thoughts of the community and coming up with structures and processes to engage them. We had to start somewhere, so I used to just say join Intersect. That doesn't work for everybody for a variety of reasons, and we've grown beyond the idea of a single institution being the harbor of all these types of things. So the next stage is participate in an ongoing process in your community where you have an opinion on something, whether it be how we grow or how the product evolves. And I think then, as good stewards, we can aggregate all that as we've done with the Constitution, for example, in SIP 1694, and then you get kind of a global consensus of all these things. And frankly speaking, it's not that expensive as an ecosystem to facilitate things at this scale. It's probably in the magnitude of about 5 to 6 million per annum for the opportunity to host hundreds of workshops and all across the world and gather feedback from tens of thousands of people on an annual basis. That, I think, would be a massive competitive differentiator because no cryptocurrency currently does that, and it engages that swarm intelligence that we have.
Fred, I'd be very interested to hear your thoughts as well. What's your call to action right now for the folks here and folks listening?
Yeah, it's always a bit hard to be after Charles, right? Well, the way I think about it, right, is that in 2021, actually, the Cardano Foundation did a delegation to Jose and a stake pool here. And a couple of years later here, this fantastic university where we are, they have a Cardano lab where they're teaching people to code and teaching people blockchain, right? And the first 20 people who graduated on ICANN is now already looking for jobs, right? And they run a node and so on. So what I want to say with this is that the people we are going to interact with in the next couple of days, you are like the 1%, if not even less, who you're blockchain experts, okay? You understand a lot about Cardano and other ecosystems and so on. So my call to action for you is when you speak to somebody, think about them as being, don't teach them blockchain. Listen to what problems they have, because we are now so far as an ecosystem that I promise you that not every problem deserves a blockchain, but every problem out there has a blockchain solution. So if we can get over to a stage that all of you keep doing what you love to do, you participate in the governance of Cardano, you participate in understanding all the technicalities, but start talking to everybody else, because this university is an expert in teaching young minds about engineering, right? And with Rosa and the team right now, they're teaching about how Cardano can be a tool for them to get jobs and to change the way they do things, and they're talking about building an identity solution and using Cardano and so on. This is all opportunities which lies on top of Cardano. But sometimes we are so technical and we don't understand the real world problems out there. So why don't we invest a little bit of time in thinking about every time you meet somebody, don't teach them about blockchain. Listen to what they have to say about their daily problems and think about who you know. What app do you know? What dApp do you know? What team do you know who can be a part of that solution, so we can get some more transaction diversity on Cardano and show that it's not about one industry. This is a whole movement of changing a world of industries and bringing people together to fight this centralized world, okay? So that would be my call to action. Explore businesses.
Thank you, Fred. Now, in the United States, things are changing a little bit in the world of crypto, quite a bit. We may have a new SEC chairperson here in a little bit. And I know that you both have engaged with international regulators, with the the FCA and MiCA and Singaporean authority, so many different authorities around the world that have already tackled the issue of cryptocurrency and what to do with it. Now, if there's a blank slate and you could design something, what are a couple of the recommendations that come to mind? What would you hope that a renewed SEC or a renewed approach at the federal level at the United States, what do you think that might entail, and what would you hope to see and make it easier for you a little bit? Fred?
So take a bit of inspiration because we're in Argentina right now. And I would actually try and think about what would an Austrian economist think about closing down borders, fixing prices, and all those things. So what I would love a regulator to think about is how do I protect the consumers while increasing safety for them? How do I create new jobs? How do I create innovation? How do I foster that we become competitive in a global marketplace? Because this is not just about, blockchain. This is not just about AI. This is not about drones. This is about technology does not cross a border. And we keep thinking about how do we protect those borders. Whether the borders is regulation or national borders, it doesn't really matter. So what we really need to think about is how do we think as Austrian economists when we think about creating growth. And blockchain is a part of that growth story, and is actually, frankly, one of the few technologies who can actually do something to protect the government, to protect the people out there due to the structure of it. And what you really then need is you need a very strong blockchain. You need something that is extremely decentralized. You need something where you cannot just take it over with a civil attack. And then suddenly you're down to about 1 or 2 blockchains, right? So
just don't let Wyoming decide.
Yeah, don't do that. No, so I would. That's how. If I had a blank slate right now, I would really follow very closely what's happening here in Argentina. I would follow very closely what's happening in other countries, who's actually start thinking about the way we've been running it does not work. So what if we add good technology underlying and we start creating a larger experiment where we think about the world as not hundreds of countries who protect themselves, but 7 billion people who need to live together until we find a new way to live.
Very good. Thank you. So, tenemos que estudiar el fenómeno barrial, sí, en Argentina. Got to study the neighborhood phenomenon. Yeah. Charles, your message for the regulators, and this is really ideal regulation. It's not just the United States, but.
Yeah, we've started engaging with the upcoming administration, and we had dinner with Senator Scott, and we're meeting with other key leaders. In the process of those conversations, what's nice is there is an openness to reevaluating the United States' relationship, and thus the global relationship, because they have so much influence over entities like the IMF and the World Bank and the FATA and so forth. So what we do know is that the U.S. is probably going to end its war on crypto, which means Operation Choke Point will come to an end. And a lot of the lawsuits that are currently against the exchanges will be wrapped up in some way, and the Ripple litigation will probably come to an end. How that gets rolled up is an open question, and there's a lot of nuances to it because a lot of things have been said and done, and you can't just wave a wand and magically it goes away. But it's more of a situation where it kind of gradually fades out, like recovering from an illness or something like that. Then there's an open question of what happens the morning after. You could regress back to the time before Gensler, where it's not really super regulated, but it's not unregulated, and you live in a gray zone, or you can try to pass a law. So there's a strong appetite for legislation, but then there's a question of ambition behind the legislation, because we're so far beyond where we were at in just the Gensler era of asset classification. Are you a security or a commodity? Should it be a category-based or a principles-based regulatory structure? We also have DeFi. We also have asset-based stable coins. We also have identity products. We also have privacy, like Tornado Cash and these types of questions. You have custodial standards, especially for non-custodial wallets. What should be applied there? You have standards for operators, like the stake pools, and are they in some way regulated actors or not? And the problem is there's an enormous amount of gray area ambiguity in these things, and it's creating heartburn for everybody globally because you're like the Schrodinger's cat of compliance. You're both in and out of compliance at the same time. It's like compliance superposition. You know, it just depends on how you measure it and what lawyers you hire. So in an ideal world, I think you need to move first to a principles-based system, similar to how the CFTC does look at things. And you need to think very clearly about what consumer protections are applicable. And typically what you would do is you would measure markets in terms of their fragility to manipulation. And so the very first thing you need to do is a good understanding of decentralization. That's no coincidence why we have the Edinburgh Decentralization Index, because we wanted to understand, are there actors in the ecosystem that if they go rogue or bad can create catastrophic harm to that ecosystem? That's the very first starting point, because if there are none or they're well understood, then you move to individual actors as opposed to the entire ecosystem as a whole. So that's the security or commodity debate. Second, the idea of algorithmic regulation is really important. Fred alluded to this with the international accounting standards. Well, the U.S. tax code, the U.S. securities code, these types of things are so complicated and serpentine, nobody can read or understand them. In fact, you could spend your lifetime trying to parse the entire U.S. tax code. You'd probably be 70 by the time you'd finished your first reading of it, not less than even understanding it, because it's so intricate at this point. So it's really important that we start taking a lot of these legal frameworks and putting them into code, and then using LLMs and algorithms to analyze it, to look for bugs or interpretations and help us get to a point where compliance means calling an API instead of calling a lawyer. That's really where we need to go. And then that allows you to have an intelligent conversation about cross-border regulation. So if I want to be in compliance with Switzerland and the United States and Abu Dhabi and the UK all at the same time, I pull the Abu Dhabi library and the Swiss library and the UK library and the US library, and then basically it has a custom path for how transactions get to settlement, and settlement equals compliance. That's the world we need to live in. That's why we're building Midnight as an example, because for us to get there, you need a privacy component and selective disclosure and other components for the KYC and AML and these types of things that would be necessary for a world like that. So I think there's a path, but you have to kind of eat the elephant one bite at a time. And the first is just a jubilee and reset where the war ends, and then the global agencies take a step back and they realize that they should wait for the U.S. to get a law passed. And then on the U.S. side, you break it down to administrative changes, executive orders, and legislation. We'll probably testify before the Senate here in March or February, whenever Tim takes over the Banking Committee. And then that'll begin the formal conversation on the legislation side. And I think a bill will be passed in 2025. The level of ambition behind it is going to be hard to say, but if it's done in a do no harm, then the next step would be basically a sandbox style approach where they kind of let people know what's going to be on the menu for litigation and what's not, and let the industry come together. And there does need to be some form of a global SRO conversation of how the main actors in the industry can work together and in software create some best practices, like the foundation putting itself on the blockchain. That should be a universal standard for all DAOs and DLTs. Just, it's common sense. If you're going to be in this industry, you should have that capability. So once somebody does it, then the other people should borrow it, iterate it, refine it, treat it like an open source project. That's an example of something. The same for automated regulation. Once Midnight exists, I'd love to go sit down with Sunday Swap or MinSwap or Uniswap or one of these swaps. There's a lot of swaps. And basically automate and create a regulated DEX. And so basically Midnight is treated as an oracle, and if funds are to be deposited or withdrawn, they have to go through Midnight to the DEX. And in the process of doing that, they actually have a compliance regime, but it's totally automated and it's typed to the jurisdiction. So then suddenly you have a DEX that looks like an exchange, even though it's operating in a completely decentralized mode, and that can then serve as a template for how one would approach DeFi-based regulation in a sensible way. But we're not going to get that sorted out in 12 months. You know, the best we can hope for is to end the war, and then 3 to 5 years we can gradually eat that elephant, and then by the time we enter the 2030s, I think we'll be in a good position. Why do we want to do this? Because there's $20 trillion in real-world assets that are waiting on the sidelines, and they want to enter the cryptocurrency space. They cannot do that without a clear regulatory structure. So as happy as we get when Bitcoin goes up and crypto goes up, we're leaving about 9 out of every $10 on the table as an industry if we don't find a way to bridge this gap. It's just we have to be treated as co-equal parties. We can't be treated as second-class citizens, and that's what the Gensler era has done to us. So this is a reset, and I believe this administration is willing to work with us as an industry, and we as an industry certainly have the level of access required to have fair consideration. And it's just going to be a lot of meetings, a lot of discussions, a lot of testimony, and a lot of the behind-the-scenes work to get us to where we need to go.
I think one thing we really have to do as a community is really stand proud around we are a public permissionless blockchain. Because we can never say, okay, we're going to do a trade-off and say, you know, you have to have certain type of identity in there, and that means that we need to identify all SPOs and so on, because the ripple effect is just simply too big. And when we think about the 2-3 billion who don't have an official identity or don't have the paperwork to go through these processes, we're sort of, you know, we're gaining short-term adoption based on sacrificing the vision. And that's one of the reasons why the next 2 days is so important, because we actually have to think that through. So when we write the Constitution, one of those ethos and those tenets really have to be around that. And that's a trade-off, right? So, you know, when you speak to people and they will be, oh, I cannot deal with Cardano because it's public and permissionless, you need to have a good answer for that. You need to be willing to open people's eyes and say, you know what, not everybody want to change the world. So they can maybe earn on the world, right? So I spoke to a central banker and I said, well, you get 2.5 billion more people in you can sort of interact with, and you get liquidity into the system and so on. They're like, oh, I never really thought about that. That means I can be like a global player, even though I sit in a little European country. And I was like, yeah, actually you can, right? And you think about sort of algorithmic, monetary and fiduciary policies, right? You can actually, enable that. So when we get the next, global crisis, whether COVID was one or not, instead of, just thinking about, everybody is sort of equal because I don't have the data layer, we can actually then, click a switch and the ERP system suddenly allows you to verify, yes, this was actually my income statement last year and this is the amount of subsidies I can get in this next new crisis situation. And oh, the way I can also trust the Italian vaccine system, right? Instead of me thinking, oh, I cannot trust those guys because they can, they can verify that through a trustless layer. So this idea that when the world starts in a war situation and everybody starts protecting themselves, that what you cannot do is work with a public permissionless blockchain is actually exactly opposite. This is exactly where we stand tall and where we can actually move the world. So really just, that's one of the main discussions I actually have with global regulators around the world, is that it's not necessarily bad that you cannot control or you cannot take away money or you cannot lock an address. Right? It's actually inherently very good, because that means that the rules doesn't change because somebody suddenly gets control or somebody wants something different, right? It actually means that you have transparency, but not transparency in the moment. You have transparency over time, and you have certainty over time. The thing doesn't change. So as long as you do this principle-based regulations really well, you can suddenly start thinking about how do I actually do agreements with countries who might actually change their mind next year or the year after, because you can actually log it in on the blockchain, and we have 3,000 something stake pool operators who will go up every single night and defend that right that you can be a part of such a system, right? So I think this is super, super important. So whoever speaks to a regulator, and I hope many of you will never have to, right? But if you're in that space, or if you are with the foundation or Charles and so on, right? Let's engage with them and ensure that they understand that the tenets, who's actually a part of the constitutional documentation, right? They are more important than what everybody thinks. Huh? This is actually a part of protecting the rights of Cardano.
Yeah, and I would like to point out the magic of having a programmable system is that you have a freedom of choice. The base ledger has the tenets embedded, and that maximizes the freedoms of the users. So there is no freeze and seize at the base level. There is no reversibility at the base level. There is no concept of needing identity to participate. I remember in the early governance conversations, there was a question of should DREPs and Constitutional Committee members have real-life human identity, and I was vehemently opposed to it because the question was, well, who would verify your identity? And you're introducing a central actor that creates a gatekeeping function to participating in governance. And the nice part is we get to go from an implicit understanding, like there should only ever be 45 billion ADA or stuff like that, which is currently implicit, to an explicit understanding as a consequence of a constitution. That's one of the values of having a constitution, is we unambiguously have that conversation. That said, when you program things, what you can do via smart contracts is you can say, well, for my business logic and domain, I need to have a regulated function. So a great example would be a security token. You've already passed the Rubicon of is it a security or not. You're saying it is a security. It has an issuer. It has an underlying mechanic. And there's always some degree of centralization. Like Microsoft's Microsoft. We're not going to go decentralize Microsoft. It's Microsoft. So it has a CEO, a board of directors, disclosures. And within that regime, there's private and public components of that. And there is a permissioning scheme for who should hold it. So a ledger has to make a decision. Do we just not support an asset type like that, even though it's more than $1 trillion in value? Or do we support that asset type, and which means we then have to have those capabilities? And so the cool part is those capabilities do not conflict or conflate the holding of ADA and the use of the Cardano network. Cardano is uncensored, it's open, it's immutable, nothing changes that, but now we have a domain within it for that regulated commerce, and that's how you get to the nuance required to get people mostly happy. Now the challenge with regulators is not that they're evil, it's that they're old. You know, unfortunately, what we've encountered, especially leadership in the United States, Biden is in his 80s. Chuck Schumer is almost in his 80s. Nancy Pelosi is also, I think, in that range. Janet Yellen's also in that range. I mean, Elizabeth Warren's not too young. Most of the people that are in charge are in their 60s and 70s and 80s. They grew up before the internet was even a thing, much less computers or cell phones or blockchain technology and these types of things. And it's an enormous expectation to say, oh, by the way, this person who has limited technological skills is not only going to figure out how technology works, but also figure out how to regulate something that's the apex of technology. That's the intersection of open source software development and decentralized systems and cryptography and all of these other concepts that are very foreign and alien to a lot of people. So typically what would happen is that you would rely upon the institutions and think tanks to help you translate that message, to get it to a format that the people in charge can understand. The challenge we've had in the cryptocurrency space is those think tanks and institutions, for whatever reason, have developed a slight anti-crypto bent. So they're translating reality in a way to the Elizabeth Warrens of the world and saying, oh, the only use case of crypto is money laundering and funding Hamas, which is a bizarre thing. And it's one of those moments where you get angry about it, or you can ask, well, why is that translation happening, and how do we change that? Because it's not just A or B. There's a third option of, by embracing this, you get something. For example, as a regulator, are you okay with JP Morgan Chase over the last 20 years paying $19 billion in fines because of compliance failures? Does that feel right? When you're a $1 trillion+ institution, you hold all these accounts, you're the largest bank in the world, by definition, because of your age and scale, you should be one of the most compliant actors, and you're paying $19 billion in fines. It doesn't make sense. So if something is wrong with the system, the way it's structured and being applied, and you go to this JP Morgan Chase, you say, do you like the fact like a third of your budget goes to compliance, which is non-productive? It's not about customer acquisition. In fact, it harms your relationship with your customers, because under the current laws, you have to spy on them. And it doesn't help your bonuses or your bottom line. You're wasting money to fill out paperwork and get fined in the process of not doing that right. So algorithmic regulation will solve that for the regulator and the regulatee, and massively improve the efficiency of the system and actually make a lot of money for JP Morgan. When they start understanding that, then they start saying, yeah, actually, we should embrace this, and I think there's a path forward where crypto makes sense for our bottom line. The same for medical records, the same for government transparency, especially in an age of Doge, where Elon Musk is going to cut $2 trillion apparently from the budget, which is an insane notion. It's going to require radical transparency and efficiency improvements. All of these are potential tools in the toolbox to make things better, and that's the kind of nuanced conversation that we need to start having, and saying, hey, these systems are the only path forward, because they can't be evil, you can trust them, they're immutable. When you put things in, Nobody's going to manipulate them. It's the world's best accountant. It's the world's best bookkeeper. It's the world's best auditor in many senses. And in the gains of efficiency you get aren't just you save some money. It's transformational in how businesses do business with each other, especially in an age of great powers conflict where you can no longer compel people to do things. There's the China system, the Russia system, the US system. We're not going to put that back in the bag. These systems are not interoperable. So billions of people now live in parallel economies and parallel realities. How do you do a climate treaty when China no longer talks to America and Russia doesn't talk to America? How do we do a trade treaty? Apparently we just pretend people in Russia don't exist and people in China don't exist if you live in America and vice versa. That doesn't make any sense when we breathe the same air and use the same water and we live with the same common set of resources and we want to do global business, and Microsoft has billions of customers that are kind of these gray area countries that live on both sides. What do they just do? Fire half their customer base and lose half their bottom line because countries can't get along anymore? So really blockchain is the only way to sort out and introduce a rules-based international order and when you have great powers conflict. And I think that's another message that you carry forward. And then you've delivered two major things to the regulator. If you embrace this, you still have some semblance of control over the uncontrollable. And if you embrace this, you massively improve the efficiency and quality of the relationships with the people that you're regulating. And you can finally do it on a global basis. And you and your counterparties in other jurisdictions actually have something to talk about that doesn't require a new law or require a war or something like that to get sorted out.
Let's start wrapping up, conscious about the time. So for my last question, I think it's one thing that Charles said that is really important regarding the interoperability. And I would like to ask to both Charles and Fred, how we can see the future of Cardano when it comes to interoperability, and if we have some implementations for the next couple of years already lined up when it comes to the Cardano blockchain.
Yeah, maybe just to anchor that back to something Charles said, that this principle-based regulation is really the way forward, right? And that was also our point of departure for many things with regulators. And we just have to say, the education level is just not good enough to think about principle-based regulation. So you really need to cut it down. And so in the Cardano Foundation, we answer a lot of public consultations. They're all on our website. So if you're into that nerdy field, feel free to take that, give it to your local regulator, share it. I know this is not what gives you the most clicks, right? But what can actually help quite a lot on this is to do things which is not capital markets. I know a lot of us, we really like crypto and we really have a strong belief that crypto will change the world. But if you do something right now in Cardano which is not related to capital markets, that helps us tremendously in building up this diversity that the regulator understands. This is not just capital markets, this is also healthcare. This is also book publishing, like book.io. It's an amazing use case, right? Because everybody understands, an e-reader, and everybody understands I can sell that on, and there's a footprint on the Cardano blockchain, and everybody agrees that's not a security token, right? And if you are an investment banking expert like I am, let's put some securities on the Cardano blockchain and show that you don't need this control, and we change the CSD. But for everybody out there who doesn't live and breathe finance, do something on the Cardano blockchain which is not capital markets related. That is hugely helpful in all of our conversations. And if if you're not an engineer, you're not an entrepreneur, well, just buy a book or something like that on the Cardano blockchain. There's many really cool projects out there which you can do that on. So in short, I think what you're going to see in terms of implementations, both through the IBC and through the partner chain network and through Hydra and other things, you're going to see that people are starting to understand. Before, we had a dream of a blockchain. Now we have a fully functioning, robust blockchain who can do everything a modern blockchain can do across all industries. So now this is about you being creative and thinking about, I go to work every single day in this little company and, it's not really interesting and I'm just dreaming about getting into blockchain. I'm like, no, you're going to put blockchain into that business and show them that it's going to earn more money, get more happy clients, or cut cost. And when you do that, well, suddenly you're in blockchain.
Yeah, the book.io example is so powerful because people don't realize how much power Amazon has until Amazon exercises that power. So imagine that somebody publishes a controversial book and you buy the book, you start reading it, and then the next day you wake up and it's not in your Kindle anymore. You say, what the hell happened to my book? And you get a little email, we've refunded you, we've decided to deplatform this book. So every single digital copy has just suddenly been turned off. That could happen, and actually has happened in many cases. And you say, but I bought the book, it's my book. Not really. You bought access to a copy, but you actually don't own that book, and you have no provenance or control over it. Whereas if you do with book.io, you actually own the book. You own the digital distribution of it, and nobody can go and steal it from you and take it out of your account because it's politically inconvenient to them. And so digital content doesn't have that physical analogy of a physical copy of a book, and that's not a financial asset. That's an intellectual asset, and it's quite broad, the set of things that people could do. With respect to interoperability, the biggest challenge in the blockchain world right now is tokenomics work against interoperability. And what we're trying to solve with Midnight is a way around that, and it's a very clever MacGuffin, and we're not the only actor, like EigenLayer and others are exploring it, but these next generation metachain concepts, what they're trying to say is you give everybody something, and you have multiple validators and multiple chains maintain the state of that system, and by doing so, they get token rewards just like the Cardano holders do. Okay, what that means is that they care because both parties are making money from the existence of this asset. So it's no longer, well, I have to kill you for my token to go up. It's now we can rise together. So there's actually now using tokenomics to accelerate interoperability and connection as opposed to fight interoperability inside the system. Then naturally what happens is people get really tired of how expensive and hard it is to maintain the bridges and interoperability between the systems. So very organically they just start talking to each other, and we start agreeing on communication standards, pub-sub standards, the use of recursive snarks so that we have trustless bridging technologies. And I don't care what voodoo they put in to make that work. You know, they just tell me the right spell and I'll go do that, and then I know it works everywhere. It's like Wi-Fi. You know, you don't, as an entrepreneur, pick your Wi-Fi standard. You just off the shelf, whatever it is, you grab that and that's what you use. Okay, you're not going to go create your own Wi-Fi. Even if you could do it better, you do it because that, you know, everybody in the world uses it. And so I can connect to the hotel Wi-Fi here in Argentina with my Korean phone coming from an American network. That's the magic of interoperability, and blockchain needs to have that moment. And I think we'll organically get there if the tokenomics push us in that particular direction. The other thing that's a little challenging is we don't have a common set of definitions. We've worked really hard to attempt to create a definition for decentralization. This is among our most controversial work. It's the first time in my career that people actually have read and cared about an academic paper at the Reddit level. But they care because they didn't get measured right, you know, in their mind. They say, oh, no, we're far more decentralized than what EDI said. Well, that's like your opinion, man, but the objective scale says that you guys aren't decentralized because like 90% of the token supply is held by one person, and there's only 3 developers and they all work for the same company, and you have governance keys and all the keys belong to one entity. It doesn't really feel very decentralized. They're like, no, we're decentralized, we're a blockchain. So like one guy can shut the whole thing off and destroy the entire product. It's like, that doesn't make any sense. So you need common notions of throughput, you need common notions of value, and you need kind of like a blockchain GDP, not token price, and you need common notions of decentralization. And then interoperability makes sense because then you have a way of understanding the nature of the system that you're dealing with as a government, as an enterprise, and as a person deploying. And then you can basically choose which systems are safe for your consumers and which aren't for government procurement and so forth. Like, for example, I don't know why the state of Wyoming would choose systems that constantly go down for their flagship thing. But maybe if they had some objective standards, they would be in their selection metrics. But they didn't have these standards, so they could just choose to omit them with their former consensus employee executive director. I'm not bitter. I promise I'm not. Maybe a little. But you know, that's the point, though, is that standards get you out of trouble because then everybody's talking the same language, and it's no longer an opinion. There's no longer subjectivity about it. There's objectivity about it. And then standards also give you the ability to communicate with people. Like one of our most fruitful collaborations recently was DREC, where we got with Hedera Hashgraph and Algorand and Ripple and others, and we started talking about some baselines of wallet recovery. Very simple thing, but it's a universal thing across the board for all cryptocurrencies. It doesn't matter who you are, your users will be storing a cryptocurrency, and your users, if you survey them, 7 out of 10 wake up every night in a cold terror with sweat rolling down their head about, did I lose my crypto or will somebody steal my crypto if they're self-custodying. It's even the big guys in the space, they wake up with these concerns because it's scary. You're your own bank. You can be robbed at any time. You can lose at any time. So this idea of having a belt and suspenders way of securing and recovering your crypto in the event that something's happened or you die and your family being able to do that, or for estate planning purposes, being able to figure out how this works, is a universal good. So why in God's name is there going to be the Cardano way and then the Algorand way and then the Ripple way, and then you push it upon the consumer to be an expert in cryptography? There should just be a standard for how we think about this, and blockchains adopt such a standard. There are 14,000 different things we could talk about in terms of these types of standards. And our hope is that over the next few years, we embrace and extend this mindset and push it through. And every time we do it, it massively improves the safety, the user experience, the consumerizability of the products, and ultimately the consumer protections of the products, which is what the regulator is actually looking for. And that's what mass adoption is looking for. And that's how you get billions of users inside the system. So it's encouraging to me that people are finally starting to reach out to us and talk to us and have a relationship and actually value the security and knowledge that we've assembled in this ecosystem. And we're able to be first-class citizens with people like Ripple and Hedera and Algorand and others. And I think that will eventually work its way into Ethereum. And we're in the Bitcoin space now, we actually get to finally work with the Bitcoin wallet vendors for Bitcoin DeFi. And that's really exciting because that's the big money. And the exchanges will come as well. And that's where you get the interoperability. And that's where you actually get the good consumer experience, in addition to all the things I've mentioned.
I know we're probably well over time at this point, but I've got one closing thought for you guys. I just was curious if you can share a couple words on what you hope leadership looks like in the Cardano community moving forward, and just the next 18, 24 months, what you would hope to see come out of the community in terms of leadership.
So I have very strong views on leadership and non-leadership and management and all those things. So the way I kind of look at it is, right, is more about ownership. So people need to take ownership of what they do, what they contribute to, and what effect that has to the local environment, whether that's digital or physical, they operate within. And the larger Cardano will be, the more people will argue, sometimes over petty things, sometimes over something that's really important for them, but for the rest of us, we will think at it like, why are they even bothering? And that's because they care. They truly, honestly care. And this is why this moment is so important. I don't think we could get to a constitution if Cardano was 100 million people, right? Because there's just so many different views and there will be so many different ways of optimizing towards different things. So I think what we have to get to is a situation where really people take true ownership. And ownership really means that they really care downstream and to the people they interact with and to the people they serve. And to do that, they also need the economic opportunity that it makes sense to them. And that means that we need to be able to actually prove to people that yes, you can earn money by running a business on Cardano. Or you can have a product on Cardano, and you know for a fact that Cardano also exists in 10 and 20 years' time. And you know for a fact that the governance of Cardano won't dramatically shift in the next 20 years. Because when you start thinking about having 100 employees or 600 employees or 10,000 employees or a country, you can't run that on an infrastructure who constantly changes. Right? So we need to get into a mode where we say, okay, now the basics are set, evolution will happen, right? And that requires economic opportunities, and then people really truly take ownership, and you have to stop pointing fingers at people and start thinking about what do I contribute to this ecosystem.
You know, the best protocols are ubiquitous, invisible, and non-offensive. You know, you look at TCP/IP, nobody wakes up and says, gosh, as a consumer, I only use UDP, and that's my thing. I'm sorry, get this thing away from me. I mean, they don't even know what the hell that is. They're like, is that a football team? What is TCP? And it's been around for a very, very long time, and it's ubiquitous, and every single device in your pocket understands this protocol, knows how to talk this protocol, and it's one of the backbone pillars of the internet. And so for Cardano to get really successful and for our leaders to achieve that for us, there has to be a roadmap to invisibility and ubiquity. There has to be this ability where you don't say, gosh, I'm running a business, I'm going to start with Cardano and then figure out how to make money with that. It has to start with leaders saying, I want to take accountability over a problem in my world. And your world can be the Boy Scout Club, your world can be your local city, your world can be your country, the world can be a problem like carbon or energy production, whatever the heck is appealing and interesting to you. And you're very passionate about that. And if we've done a really great job, Cardano becomes a natural companion that you take along with you on the journey. And every step of that journey, it's helping you in some way. It's preventing you from falling into the ice crevasses, and it's giving you the rope you need to climb the mountain, and it's teaching you lessons along the way that help you get where you need to go. And maybe some of those things are technological lessons, and some of those things are cultural lessons. Like, just for example, the act of bringing people from 50 countries and getting them to talk about something as esoteric as a blockchain constitution is a PhD course in coordination that we spent as an ecosystem millions of dollars and 2 years of time learning. Why should that be thrown in the dumpster as soon as we finish that? The leaders of this ecosystem should carry that with them. At least one of you should form a consulting company and actually teach other people how to do that, not just blockchains, but governments themselves, because the average age of a constitution, I think Mark was telling me, is 17 years. Well, okay, that means, every 20 years, you got a lot of constitutions that are coming up for renewal. So this is a pretty good skill set, actually, if you think about it. There's a lot of countries floating around. So that's an example of what the leadership can do, is be cognizant that to lead, you have to earn the right to lead, and you earn that by choosing a problem and that everybody agrees is a problem. And then the protocol builders, their job is to make Cardano the best companion to go along the ride and get you where you need to go and help you get there. It's not terribly sexy work, and in many cases it's thankless work. Nobody really knows who writes the RFCs for the IETF or the W3C or these types of things unless you're intimately involved with them. But those are the people who actually end up changing the world, and those are the people who end up doing the big things. It wasn't too long ago that a very young Hal Finney was working with Phil Zimmerman and John Callis on the PGP standard in 1991. Well, Hal went on to be one of the pioneers who helped build Bitcoin, and we're all here today because of his pioneering work. I don't believe in 1991, when he was figuring out public key cryptography and web of trust and these things, he had in the back of his mind, oh, as a side quest, I'm going to go work with this weird Satoshi Nakamoto person, and we're going to go build like a global financial system that Trump is going to start a strategic reserve for, who, by the way, will become president in 2016 and 2024. I don't think he was thinking that, right? He was doing the thankless work of writing an RFC and getting people to work on that and collaborate with that, because he wanted to solve a very real problem, which is, how do I securely communicate over the internet? I don't really feel comfortable with email being like a Post-it card where you write your message on the back of it and everybody gets to read your letter. I mean, how many messages would you send if everybody gets to read your messages, except for the NSA? You would be like, I don't know about that, man. Maybe I shouldn't send those pictures, or I shouldn't send that angry email, or these types of things. But he solved that problem with Zimmerman and all these other people. And PGP is still around today. It's a wonderful standard decades later. And nobody really thanked him for it or paid much attention to him, but that's what leaders do. They do the thankless work. They're servants. They're very humble, and they do the work because that's the work that needs to be done. And over time, that work aggregates together, and it solves society-scale problems, and it makes everybody's life a heck of a lot better. So we have to, as leaders in the Cardano ecosystem, get into that mindset, not worry too much about ego or who gets the credit, or just worry much more so that the things we do are meaningful and the things that we do are going to be useful companions. And then we just have to go and have the audacity to make sure that people are going after the big problems. That's why I always say Cardano is for the economic, political, and social system. So I'd love to see nation states use Cardano for its elections. I'd love to see central banks use Cardano for their money systems and actually put integrity and sound money into their systems and prevent people from being spied on. I'd love to see the replacements for Facebook and X and LinkedIn run on Cardano as decentralized social networks. And those are super freaking hard problems. There's a lot of moving pieces to it, and they're very thankless problems in the beginning to solve because 90% of them are hardcore technology and nobody will know how it runs. If we've done our job right with Cardano, it's going to be a companion to help that hardcore technology not seem so unassailable, and then somebody will figure it out, and whoever figures it out, congratulations, you changed the world for billions of people.
Just one more round of applause for our panelists here, for Fred Gregar and for Charles Hoskinson. Thank you guys so much. Yeah. And Rafa, of course.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Bienvenidos.
We are closing this Cardano Tech Week, and we are starting the Governance Week. So I will ask Charles if you can say just few words about your expectations about the Constitutional Convention. Okay? Thank you. With that, we are closing the day. Thank you.
So I'll be brief since I'm standing in between you guys and the amazing Argentinian wine and amazing Argentinian food. So I know that I'm not going to be able to compete with that long term. First off, thank you all for coming and listening to us. This is the product of many people working together diligently for the last 2 years. Argentina is an unusual but amazing place to hold such an event. And a lot of people traveled to get here. In fact, I was just at the Asado earlier today, and one person from Australia, it took them 44 hours to get here to Argentina. So I said, I guess you've got the scenic route. But what was crazy is that he was filled with energy and life and actually excited to be here. And that's an incredible thing. And it's an incredible honor that people would be willingly to travel for 44 hours to go and talk about a blockchain constitution. So that's very magical. You know, the other thing that's really magical is we have such great partners. So first, I'd like to thank the hospitality of UTN. You know, this is a phenomenal university. I didn't know anything about it before I came to Argentina, but then after we started working with them, I was impressed with the professionalism and brilliance of the staff and leadership and their openness to new ideas and their openness to embracing all of us, not just providing space and the ability to have a lab, but also exposing their students to these new ideas. Argentina is actually a world leader in blockchain technology. And I'm not just saying that because I like the food and I happen to be here. I'm saying that because actually one of the first mobile wallets for Bitcoin was built in Argentina. It was built in 2012 for BitPay, which was one of the first cryptocurrency companies to receive VC funding. They were based in Atlanta, Georgia, and it was Tony and one of his other partners. And Tony was a cryptocurrency trader, so they set up BitPay to try to get more crypto because they thought Bitcoin was going to be very valuable, which they were right for. So they said, you know, one of the things that will make it easier for merchant adoption is we need a mobile wallet. And so they actually opened up, because they knew Wentz Casares, who did Zappo, an office here in Buenos Aires, and they actually developed Copay and BitPay, the wallet here. So some of the very first Bitcoin developers, core developers, and Bitcoin infrastructure developers 12 years ago were actually here in Argentina. That was before the vast majority of the United States. In fact, there was a larger Bitcoin group in Buenos Aires than there was in New York at one time, to give you a sense of the legacy of this country. Well, they didn't go anywhere. In fact, those Bitcoiners have been doing some of the most pioneering and thankless work on the Bitcoin protocol. If you look at Sergio Lerner, for example, he's been pioneering a concept called BitVMX. So because of Taproot, there's now the ability to embed sophisticated transactions into Bitcoin. They're expensive and hard to do. So somebody had to do the thankless work of creating kind of a virtual machine to write programs and translate them into Bitcoin script. And so what they've done with BitVMX is actually something called a RISC-V processor instruction set. And you can take an arbitrary language like C++ or C and compile it into RISC instructions, and then they have a translator that converts it into Bitcoin script that can execute on Bitcoin mainnet. This is not a small thing. When I first started in the industry, that was fantasy land. It wasn't possible to do something like that. And right here in Argentina, they figured that out. Not California with Blockstream and their billions of dollars, or not London or Tokyo, but they actually got it done here. So that tells you there's something very special about this community and this ecosystem, and it's good to get reacquainted with it. And it's one that deeply understands the need for sound money. It's one that deeply understands the need for automation of regulation, especially as the country begins to deregulate and open up its economy. And it understands that this can be a very transformational technology. And what's really exciting to me is the young people get it, and they want to study, they want to be part of it. And it's going to be the gateway to South America. I think Argentina, if you want to do business anywhere in South America, is probably the best place right now to set up your business and broadcast into Paraguay and Brazil and other places. And that makes me incredibly excited. So it's great to be here. It's great to know all of you. We're going to have a very exciting next few days. The UBA has been a wonderful host for us. They opened the School of Law up with a lot of graciousness. It's an amazing building. I think, JJ, correct me, like 18 presidents or something like that? Or a lot. And Mauro knows the number, right? How many? 15. 15 presidents went to that law school. So either that's a good thing or a bad thing. I don't know. It depends. It depends on your opinion. But it does show you that that is a great organization, and it makes great leaders. And the fact that we now can go there and actually write Cardano's constitution at such a wonderful institution is going to be a great honor for us. And there's going to be a lot of interest from the university. The dean's going to be speaking there. And their law students are just blown away by the fact that an actual constitution is being written there. I guess in the history of Argentina, Buenos Aires was left out of the constitution for this country. So finally, we solved the problem. Cardano actually gets BA to write a constitution. So you're welcome for that. We figured out a way to get that done. I believe that was around 1850 or something like that. I guess there was some politics back in the day. Go figure, in South America. But all things considered, I'm just blown away and humbled. It's been 10 years of my journey, and for many of you, you've been with us since at least 2017, some even earlier. So it's been several years of your lives as well. And as we enter the new phase of Cardano, this is just the beginning. We're learning how to do governance. Next year is about getting it done and learning how to do it well, and then every year thereafter is about making it better. So the Constitution we produce is a starting point, but there's a lot more to do to make the system more inclusive, to make the system more effective, and ultimately make the system able to make great decisions on a regular basis quickly. This governance experiment is not just applicable to Cardano, but it can also be applicable to nation states. So we're educating many people all around the world of what good governance looks like, and taking them from a passive, cynical role where they sit on Twitter and complain about politician XYZ for Team Blue or Team Red or whatever team you're on, to an active, engaged person where they actually have some agency for the first time in their life. Let's be honest here. How many of you thought you would be writing a constitution? I didn't think that was a thing you were allowed to do. You know, I thought maybe you're like a general and you conquer a country or something and you go write one. Like there's 5 guys that get to do that. Or the same was create your own money. That was another thing you're not allowed to do. Well, we've done both in like 10 years. That's pretty cool. And because of that, we've trained so many people to think a little differently and think creatively in the world. These are the people that will be the future leaders of their countries. These are the people that will be the future leaders of Fortune 500 companies. These are the people who will educate the leaders of their countries and the leaders of major corporations. And so the real value of this is the agency that we're creating collectively, showing that the rules of the world are malleable. You can change them if they don't work, and you have control, not somebody you've never met, that you can't influence, that probably works for Google or a corporation or something like that. You have control. That's the real value of what we've done. And if there's something you don't like, don't worry about it. It will change at some point. You know, the world ebbs and flows. And we sometimes are down, sometimes we're up. It's cyclic. It's okay. Just take the time, educate yourself, and grow. And realize that great things can happen in rooms like this that echo throughout the entire world. So thank you all for being part of this family. Thank you all for traveling here. Thank you all for the investments that you've put in. It is not a trivial amount of time. To be a delegate, you had to have been in a country, attended a constitutional workshop, spent countless hours arguing with other people, not been enough of an asshole to get voted out, but actually voted in. So you have to be like somewhat friendly and nice. And then decided after getting voted in that it was a good idea for you and a friend to get on a plane and travel all the way over here. That is a huge commitment. Just to have the right to come here to go and have another fight and talk about a constitutional document that will take some time to get ratified. And then after we finish this, we have to go and convince the entire Cardano community what we wrote was a good idea. That's a lot of work. And the fact that you had the courage to do that and the investment of time to do that is a truly magical thing. You can't pay people to do this. They have to have passion, and they have to have desire, and they have to honestly believe that what they're doing is going to change the world. And guess what? You did. You changed my world, and many of you, you've changed your own worlds as a direct consequence of your participation. Do not for a moment believe that that was a meaningless endeavor. Understand that this is about the only meaningful thing a person can do. You don't have control over who gets to be president, or if a war breaks out or not, or if the economy collapses. All at the end of the day you really can decide is who you are as a person and what you believe and what you can contribute and do. And each and every one of you decided to do something a little crazy and different and reach for the stars. And you've inspired so many people, and there's so many people in the ecosystem that really, truly, deeply appreciate your commitments, what you've done and what you've achieved. And I believe in all of you. And thank you for restoring my faith and passion and humanity. I will never be cynical. I will always be optimistic. And this is living proof that optimism can move everything. So let's go get it done, and let's have a hell of a celebration afterwards. Thank you.